All right, guys, we are back with another episode of Table Talk. Before we get started, I want to do a shout out to our sponsors, Merrick Health. Merrick Health is known for the hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Basically, as you guys have heard before, they do the blood work. You can either have self-service labs or guided optimization. This isn't just for hormones. I think people are getting a little mistaken by this as well. It's for preventative health as well. So do you know where your vitamin D is, for instance? Do you need a CPAP? Does your dick work? Does your dick not work? You know, all these type of things that you can't really have comfortable conversations with your physician. Merrick Health can step in and help with that. So it isn't just the hormone optimization as a lot of people are alluding to. Yes, they do the hormone optimization. Yes, they'll work with people who are on gear to mitigate risk. Yes, they'll help with people who have low testosterone rates to be able to bring the testosterone rate up. But that's not where it ends. There's also a whole vast array of helping you with your supplementation, helping you with other medications that you may need to be able to optimize your health. So if that is something that you guys are interested in, which you all should be, go to merrickhealth.com/table talk. What you will find there is the labs that we have set up that we worked with Merrick with to be able to help establish where those health markers are and to give you a baseline of where to work from then, because not one thing is one thing. In other words, people will look at it and say, oh, my liver enzymes are off, and think that the solution is X. It may be off because of all these other factors that are throwing it off. So again, that's merrickhealth.com/table talk. Head over there and get 10% off your first order with discount code Table Talk. The other sponsor, of course, is Elite FTS. What I want to shout out there is there's a couple things going on right now. We have our Better Than Black Friday sales going on, which started at the beginning of the month. And when I say that, they actually are better than Black Friday sales. By that, I'm also alluding to the fact that most of this stuff will be on sale on Black Friday as well. It just won't be on sale for the same discount. So currently, we just flipped it to new offers that are going on right now. We have 25% off limited edition apparel, which directly supports Table Talk. The stronger things that I have on right now, we just brought back in again on a double order because you guys liked it so much. We've sold out of it twice so far. So those are loaded on the site now. We also have one new design, actually two other new designs that we just brought back for that. Bands are 40% off. The American Press Bar is $100 off, and I'm starting to lose my brain on what these are because we're switching the sales every 48 hours. On Wednesday starts the annual equipment sale. So head over to elitefts.com and pick up the limited edition apparel and whatever else you need. Discount code TABLETALK10 for 10% off your first order. With all that said and done, and the person that always timestamps past my sponsors, I hope you went away because I haven't seen the comment saying podcast starts here. Like they'll make a note, right? And they'll say podcast starts. Then they'll put the timestamp so you can skip past all the ads, which screw you. I told him to go away. I told him to go away a couple podcasts ago, and I think he went away. My guest today is Blaine Sumner. There's a lot of different things I want to talk to Blaine about, but just to give a quick recap here on my thoughts, right, is I'm just going to come straight out and say what nobody else seems to say. When people are talking about the greatest of all time and the best powerlifter of all time, I don't fucking understand why you get left out of the conversation. Seriously, and I'm going to tell you why, right? You have more world records than anybody else. In the IPF, you have posted the highest squat of all time by like 150 pounds over the next person, right? Something crazy like that, at least 100 pounds. The bench, I believe you were the first to bench 9 and the first to bench a grand, and yet nobody else has benched over 9. It's correct?
Correct.
And there's a freaking 816 deadlift that's in there, and more impressively is the 2856 total, right? And you've been doing this shit for 16 years. You got 50 meets under your belt. Like what? I know you're not going to sit here and say, well, yeah, I agree, but I don't understand. Like, is it because single ply is like the misfit of all this shit where the multiply and I don't get it, because you came up raw, right? And a lot of the bigger numbers were done raw as well. And they're in the IPF. And you know it's not because it's anti-IPF, because if anything was going to be part of that conversation, it would be the IPF, right?
Yep.
You know, so that's like the rundown on his list. The squats are 1135, benches 1003, deadlifts 816, which I said. The other thing with him is he played, was it Division I or Division II? Division II football. And I don't want to say made it to the pros, but had a pro day where you hit 52 reps on the bench, was the best at that time, right? Mm-hmm. And then whatever the score is when they combine all, what's that called? When they combine all the other stuff.
Kirwan Explosive Index.
Yeah. So that was the highest of all time at that point in time as well. Had it not been during the lockdowns, you probably would have played, and so that gets lost too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that kind of gets lost in the whole mix. And then most of your training's been done alone, which gets lost in the whole mix. Most of the programming has been evolving, since you started competing, mm-hmm. which gets lost in the mix. You see where I'm going with all this, right?
Sure.
But yeah, when we talk about chicken shakes, it's Blaine Sumner, which he wasn't the first person to do. But he was the first person to do the 1135, the 1003. You see, it's messed up, right?
Yeah.
So is there anything that I left out of that really weird introduction?
I think you nailed it. You got it.
Where I want to start is I don't want to spend a whole lot of time kind of going up through your trajectory of all this, because I'm more interested in some of the more finer things through the competing and programming and some of the other things. But I want to go through some of the questions that you seem to be asked a lot. Most of them I can probably answer myself. Some of them I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to let you kind of say yay or nay, right? So, the first one will be, I thought I was going to be able to do this without laughing, but I can't do it. The recipe for the chicken shake thing, right? So just, what's the recipe for the chicken shake?
Yeah, so ingredients: chicken breast, spinach, water. For your fats, you can do olive oil, almonds, and for my carbs, I've done protein or potatoes or rice.
How does the rice mix, by the way? That's not going to mix.
Yeah, terrible. But I just figured out how many macros I need per day, and then I broke that down into 8 shakes because I was drinking 8 shakes per day. It's pretty.
Yeah. Well, I think what gets missed there is people get too wrapped up in. I know why you're doing it, right? You're doing it for the calories, and when you're close to 400 pounds. That's a lot of calories.
Yeah.
I don't think people comprehend. That's a lot of calories. You can only eat so much. Now the fact that you didn't have other real meals in there is kind of weird to me, but whatever. You just kind of get used to it. First off, they're nasty, right? They're nasty.
Yeah.
So 8 times a day, or whatever that is, you're drinking this nasty shit.
Mm-hmm.
All for one reason, to be the best power lifter that you can be.
Yep.
So I think when they look at the chicken shakes, they're forgetting what the reason was.
Yes.
Like, oh, chicken shakes to gain weight. I need to gain weight, though. Drink one chicken shake and stop. Right? That's for a purpose, to fuel your body so you can become the best power lifter you can become. And it was done over a period of years. I'm sure there's breaks when you let your body weight fall, but over a period of years. And then when you speak about, one of the things I like getting into with a podcast are people that go all in, to something and really know what that means.
Yep.
Right. To me, the chicken shake thing is kind of like an all in mentality. Right. So a lot of it's probably your mind knowing that you probably could have just ate a different 1,000-calorie meal, but fuck it, I'm doing this because this is a harder option.
Yep.
And would that be correct?
100%.
Okay. The other one I want to hit real quick, get off of the table, is why not go multiply, right? So, and again, I'll answer this. I hate to do this for people, right? But I'm going to answer this one because I know if I were you, how weird it would be to answer the question, right? It's because you're trying to toe a line, right, between this group and all this other kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Where, okay, you came up through. First off, there's the drug-free thing that plays into that. It's not a lot of people in non-drug tested federations, not saying that all of them are taking drugs, so that would be false, are drug free. So there's that. And then with that, no matter what anybody thinks or doesn't think, I've seen people do amazing things drug free. That's a badge that you can wear with pride, So then all of a sudden you jump over, there's going to be an assumption that's going to be made. Like, okay, now he's taking stuff. Or, oh, you know what? He didn't get that much stronger. He must have been taking stuff the whole time. Right? There's all these things that's just that side, right?
Yep.
Now the other side is, and this is one of the things I don't think that you'll talk about in detail. And the IPF's changed too, so we'll talk about that. When you leave the IPF to compete for another federation, there's rules first off that won't allow you to compete back in the IPF again. Right? Now I don't know how long those rules last. Is it what's it specified as? Is it a year, 3?
I don't know anymore, and it's.
Well, I know it was before this
Yeah.
shit in the last couple of years.
I think it was at least a year.
It was usually a year. I thought it was like 1 to 3 years,
Yeah.
right? So now if you spent your whole life and your whole career chasing world champion, world titles, that becomes part of that too. Now you're going to jump over here. That's a big assumption that you're going to think, oh yes, I'm going to like this. And I'm going to like this so much that I'm never going to want to go back. And then when you go back, you're going to have a big painted X on your back, right? So
Yep.
you really can't go back. So it's like a divorce.
Yep.
From something that you may not really like all that much, but it's what you know best, and it's what you've been chasing for a decade. So my flip back to that would be for all the multiply guys that have always been multiply. Are you willing to take the decade that you've had competing in multiply, jump to another federation, knowing 100% full well you can never go back and lift multiply again? Now follow me. We're talking federations, but we're also talking gear. Like where else is there really single ply gear competitively outside of the IPF?
Yeah.
I can name one federation, but competitively it's a whole different game. So now you're just kissing your whole discipline. See ya. That's a big one.
Yep.
Right? So that doesn't get talked about very much. And I'll piggyback off that because I do follow this stuff more than people think. Now you have the situation that the IPF has with the USAPL, right? And whatever the new federation is that feeds into the IPF, which I believe is all based upon drug testing, right? At the lower levels.
Yep.
Which I don't know if I necessarily disagree with that, because I'll let you talk about that real quick, because that's more. So why was the USAPL drug testing at levels under? Because here's the crazy thing that people don't understand, then I'll let you run with it because I'm talking way too much, and I usually don't, but most people aren't going to talk about this, and I'm going to tell you why. If they didn't drug test, except only the international lifters, they'd be compliant. But because they do, they're not compliant.
Correct.
So why do they not just say, screw it, let's just test the international guys?
Yep. So the US APL's, foundational grassroots morals is to have equal platform for lifters at all levels, from the person doing their first meet locally to the guy going internationally. And to abide by that, they need to have drug testing at the lowest levels. They need to drug test the local meets where you got people competing for the first time, and they have to drug test people at the very top. Because of the WADA rule changes and some stuff from the IPF, financially they're not able to do that and hand over all the drug testing to a party they need all the drug tests to be WADA compliant. Financially, they can't do that because it's so expensive for the WADA tests. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's what. Yes, it does, and that's kind of what I thought. Because let's say, I accidentally on my way up competed in, this was before USAPL, an ADFPA meet, and I didn't know it. It was with a bunch of other guys, and so I ended up guest lifting when I got, because I was not drug free. Right? I'm like, I can't do this. Like, this is fucked up. They just do a polygraph. Just put a tack in your shoe. I'm like, I ain't gonna put a tack in my shoe and stuff. I talked to the meet director and said, look, man, I don't want to be, just let me lift, judge me, whatever, but just put me as a guest lifter or something like that. I don't want to, take this away from anything. But my point was, even with that just being a polygraph, which isn't great, right? It's enough to deter.
Yeah.
It's me, right? It was enough to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. Morally, I wasn't going to do it anyhow. But just to be immediately told, here's what this is. And it was a small, stupid, I didn't even know what federation it was. It was that small of a meet.
Yeah.
That I don't think that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Because especially today where kids will train for, I've heard stories of kids will train for like a month or two and then start trend because they just think it's part of the, you know what I'm saying? They think it's part of the process. Like, oh, you train, you start to get serious, you want to bodybuild, powerlift, whatever it is, you need to take drugs. Then they do. Where if they're USAPL at the time, who knows now, right, was the biggest federation, which anybody who doesn't believe that, there's this really cool site called openpowerlifting.org and you can filter by number of members. Sometimes this amazes me, right? I know you're an engineer and you understand Excel and stuff like that. This is completely boggling to me. Like, oh, I don't know if this federation's growing or not. You're like,
yeah,
Google, man.
Yeah, proof's in the pudding.
You can be able to see it. But I think that would help those kids now, right? Because if it's becoming more widespread, the use at younger ages, and I think everybody can agree that's not a good idea. Disagree at higher levels, but at a younger level, everybody's going to be on the same page. Like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Why not give them a playing field to where they can go and compete and then know that, you know what, I'm going to compete with other kids that are also clean. I don't see that being a bad thing.
I agree completely.
But the way that this kind of looks, I'm sure there's also more layers to the political spectrum than just this.
Absolutely.
But the way it looks from the outsider looking in is like, this is stupid. This is really stupid. So now another federation forms, which I don't know the name of it, American Powerlifting, whatever, something like that. That forms to where, say you still competing. This goes back to the original question. So you're still competing. Are you going to compete in the IPF or are you going to compete in the USAPL or are you going to say fuck it and just go multiply? Right? Okay. So now if you go compete in the USAPL, you just went against the IPF rules and you're banned for a year. Right? And this also, I think, includes coaching of athletes. So if you compete in the USAPL and you're coaching athletes worldwide, which you have a lot of athletes that you coach, you can no longer coach those athletes that are affiliated with the IPF, which fucks with your business, right?
Yep.
And am I off base here?
No, you're
okay.
Dead on.
All right. So this is what I think people miss is it's not just as easy as fuck it, I'm going to go lift in this other federation. It's like, fuck it, you can never lift in that federation again. Oh, and by the way, you can't train any of our athletes either online with an app or in person at all, which is bullshit.
Yep.
Right? Now, does that work if you go, and so now you go USAPL, no, so now you go the other way. Let's say you go American Powerlifting or IPF. I think the same thing works in reverse. Like if you do that, then I don't think you're allowed to go back to the USAPL or coach their lifters. Is that correct?
I think in all of this political infighting, the USAPL has tried to be more open door, so I don't think they're nixing anyone that's been associated with IPF or Powerlifting America. I think they're still being very welcoming.
Yeah. Okay. So you could go and then still come back to the USAPL if you wanted to go for the Worlds again. So the realistic route seems to be the IPF, if I were in your shoes, because there's a road back.
Yep.
Where the other way, there's no road back.
Right.
That's what I don't think y'all understand. Am I?
Yeah.
Kind of in the realm.
The first 10 minutes of this or whatever that we've been on, from the chicken shakes to that, I get asked. Those are the most questions I get asked in my life. I'm just referring them to the first 10 minutes of this podcast, and I don't have to answer questions anymore.
Well, there you go. That's because as I listen, because I've heard you on other podcasts, and I hear the question, and I'm like, here's what I would think if I was him, right?
Yep.
And you're answering, and I don't want to say you're answering like a politician, but you're answering, right? But there's also risk to you saying what I just said.
Yeah.
With that X on your back. Or he didn't say it, I said it. He may just be agreeing with me because he's sitting here at the table and it's my podcast. So there, he didn't say shit, right? So I think that might have been the big ones because it's like boom, boom, boom. It's always the same ones. So I wrote them down, so I made sure not to miss any of them. Oh, those are the good ones. All right, so now that I got that stuff over with, and you've answered you said 3 sentences. All right, now we can do the podcast. So yeah, what's up with the Dancing with the Stars thing? Like, how did that all come about? Because I'm going through your Instagram the other day, and then there you are, doing this Dancing with the Stars thing.
Yeah, it was actually really cool. It's a local thing in our community, and they model it after the TV show, and it's a fundraiser for local house for troubled youth. We've been to watch it for years and years, and my wife's kind of a figure in the public community, being a realtor and all that. So we finally got asked to be one of the couples to dance, and said yes, and it worked well because any other year I wouldn't have done it because I'm always getting ready to compete in Worlds in November, which I wouldn't have done because practice multiple times a week and all that. But it was awesome. It was fun way to spend time with my wife and kind of a mental distraction from the lifting injuries and struggles. So it was fun.
How long have you been with her?
6 years.
Okay. So she's been, when did your back start to go bad?
2008 is when it started.
Well, I know, but I mean bad. 2018? 2016?
I'd say 2017. 2017 it really started to go downhill, and then the worst of the worst happened at March 2020 at the Arnold.
All right. And that's when you bombed
So the World Games in 2017 is when I bombed on deadlift. March 2020 is when I did my 1135 squat, and I fractured part of a vertebrae during that squat.
And that was already having issues before.
Yeah, it was disc issues before then.
Yeah. And
then the 1135 squat turned into the structural bone issues.
And then how is that? Because everything's fine. I mean, your hips have been labrum issues with your hips going way back, which that's why you want single ply, right?
Exactly.
And so was that a problem before you even started powerlifting?
Nope. That wasn't a football injury. That was a raw squatting injury in the hip labrums.
All right. So do you remember how that happened, or was it just accumulated?
Yeah, no, the first one I did, the first hip labrum I tore at the Raw Worlds in 2012. And then the next one was 2013. Do
you remember how? I mean, was it like...
Both of them were raw squats in competition.
I know that, but trying to force depth?
Yeah.
Trying to force depth. There's another thing I forgot on the list is the super heavyweight issue with the IPF. Sorry, guys, but it's true. How... Because it's not just you. Like, it's any super heavyweight that's come through the IPF has issues.
Yep.
Right? And it's not, I don't even know how to explain it. How did you manage being able to meet their depth standard even though it's inconsistent?
Roll the dice on the first one. If you get turned down on depth, and throw your health out the window to try to get a squat in on the second.
All right. And that's typically what happened in this case.
Yeah, and a lot of, most of the international meets, really.
Yeah. More so internationally than domestically?
Yeah.
Or it's hard, yeah.
I'd say. And the reason for that, too, is I never went for my big squats unless a world record or world championship was on the line. Like, nationals or qualifying meets, I would just do my opener, which was like 1025, 1047.
Yeah.
And usually just call it after that.
Yeah. Just to qualify.
Yep.
So that's actually what you would call a smart lifter, by the way. Which, man, I can go down that road, or I cannot go down. Let's go down that road later. So with this inconsistency, because I don't want to ever make somebody sound like a crybaby, but this is like before him. If you guys have the internet and there's videos, it was Brad, was one. And then Siders was another one. And even going back before that, it's just like a crapshoot, which you would think, why do they not know how to judge super heavyweights?
So you're dead right. Inconsistency is the word.
Yeah.
I just think the way the rule book is written, and this has been took more emotional on my toll the last 10 years than anything. I'm happy to talk about it, but just a lack of consensus understanding amongst international judges of what squat depth is. Mm-hmm. You can give the same rule book to 3 different judges from three different countries and show them the same squat, and you'll get 3 different answers. Mm-hmm. I just think it's a lack of training and a lack of consensus across the international judges, and especially in Europe. The thing that I always ran across is I think there's almost a style points in their head. Their background is the Olympic lifting. They love to see the upright torso, mm-hmm. knees pointing forward, coming straight down, and I had the more hinge, push the mm-hmm. hips back. So that hurt me depth judging international meets for sure.
I think it becomes a problem with that inconsistency too, because you guys are 350, 400 pounds. Your crease of the hip, like where? which 5 inches of the crease are we talking about here? Exactly.
Yep.
And that becomes the whole thing. And other thing, watching IPF Worlds is sometimes they sit like in the front, which it's weird. Like I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't want us just to sit there and say, well, they're stupid, they don't know what they're doing. I'm like trying to like sit here and say, okay, some people are gonna say they're stupid, they don't know what they're doing, but why do they think this is right? Like, what is their logic there that if they sit slightly in front and look, that they're gonna be, do you have any idea what they're actually looking at?
I have an estimate of why I think, and I think that on a lot of the lighter lifters and female lifters, they think from sitting at that angle, they can see the opposite leg. They don't have as much gut and thigh hitting each other. It's still inaccurate, but I think that's why. And another thing I've heard too, that more judges in front type thing is more of a Olympic European type thing that you see more commonly. Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, I mean, it's powerlifting, but it's where I try to balance it is, it's had a business for 25 years, so you got to look at you work as a petroleum engineering on the field, right? So you're probably putting out fires, not like probably literally fires, right? All the time, right? So if you're going into the field and there's an issue, okay, what is the issue? What's here? You got to look like at both sides, especially when it's the biggest world powerlifting platform ever. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's got to be a reason, So it's not like they just like flipped a coin. You hope not. I said, you guys go judge. Like there's got to be.
Yeah.
And I never thought of looking at the other side, which it's still wrong, but I disagree, but I could see that being one of the things. But the Olympic lifting thing, I don't get.
Yeah.
I get that's what they're exposed to,
mm-hmm.
And if they're coming up through that, and in all honesty, all rule books in powerlifting are left up to interpretation.
Yep.
I've been through them all. I'm sure you've been through them all way more than I have, or at least the IPF, the USAPL, and so forth. And it's like, what exactly does that mean? Mm-hmm. Or what does it not mean? I mean, as a competitor, there's the other thing.
Yep.
Like, what does it not mean? For super, the other one is, especially when you have gear, and you have traps. How are you supposed to keep your head on the bench? you put a beanie hat on and hope for the best. A real thick beanie hat. Uh-huh. Something like that. But you're allowed to do that, right?
Not a beanie hat. I mean, I've tried stuff with making my own headbands and having having them thick, and it's open to interpretation. Some of those judges, if your head comes up at all, they'll call it. I mean, it's still, you can sink into the bench and it could come up and still be in contact, but they'll call it. But then you have a guy with long hair and he can be up this much and they don't see it and they don't bother with it. So I've gone as far as ordering wigs and trying wigs on before international meets. I mean, I get it. Awful rule, yeah.
I get it, and I get the thought process behind the whole thing, and where those people that are listening are going to be like, why not just leave and go someplace else? go watch the first 10 minutes of the video, right?
Yep.
So then that kind of defeats that. And I'll probably say that 10 or 15 times through we go through here, because that's why I did it, by the way, is to kind of be able to refer back to that. So in 2006, I believe, was your first meet. What, I don't know let's go back to the football days. So your football, I assume, seeing your path in powerlifting, football was your life, right? 24/7, and it's more military, almost like the military when you're in college.
Yep.
From the time you wake up, go to bed. You kill it during the pro day, and then did you get tryouts anywhere?
No, so I came out the year of the lockout.
Yeah.
2010. Had successful career, really good senior season. Did great on the testing. Got in front of some scouts. Had interest from the Eagles and 49ers. As with the Redskins, got as far as getting a letter, getting an invite to training camp. Got on the phone with their travel agent. Had everything lined up, and got a call a few hours later saying camp's full. And it kind of ended there. And I had a teammate that was even better at football than me, and he went the CFL route. He got a shot in the NFL preseason, tore his pec, but I didn't want to go the CFL route or AFL and try and get in the back door, and just decided to. I always loved lifting, so I had that avenue to quench my competitive thirst and get on with my career.
Yeah, but you're skipping over something here real quick. When did you start playing? Very first time you touched a football?
I mean, child, I don't know, 5, 6, 7.
5, 6 years. So you're talking over a decade, right? And way over a decade. So maybe 2 decades? Like, how old were you when you played your last game?
Must have been 22 or something.
Yeah, so almost 20 years, right? So a huge part of your life for 20 years, and all of a sudden it's gone, right? And it seems that you didn't want to go the back door route, right? Because if you can't get in the front door, you'd rather not do it. Because when you spend 20 years, working towards that, it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Especially when you're at that point. How did you deal with that?
It was tough. It was, at that point, it was, one of probably the hardest emotional thing I had been through, because it's what I had set my sights on. So that year too, they didn't have any rookie mini camps, open tryouts because of the lockout. But I probably went 4 or 5 years without watching an NFL game, seeing anything NFL related, especially the Eagles or Redskins. Seeing anything like that, it just made me sick, and didn't watch, didn't pay attention, nothing. And the lifting at the time was strange too, because during my football career in college, I competed in powerlifting, but it was a way to get stronger and better for football. Yeah. And that's what motivated me to get bigger and stronger, was to be better at football. So once I realized football wasn't there anymore, I was like, I wonder what's going to happen to this motivation to lift heavy. I was like, is it going to still be there? Is it going to go away? What's going to happen to it? And it was still there, obviously. But yeah, it was tough emotionally going through that with the NFL stuff.
Okay. So you're kind of blowing past that really fast again, right? Where can you watch it now?
Now I can. Yep.
Okay. Now, what about college ball during that time? Or was it just like screw football entirely during the time that you were, I don't want to say anti-football, but you just didn't want to be around it?
Yeah.
Were you watching college ball or high school ball or anything like that?
Nothing.
Do you remember anything in particular that sparked your interest to actually watch a game?
I think it was probably my stepson eventually got into high school and was playing football, and I think that's what made me start watching it again, and then like, what's going on in the NFL, what's going on in college, and like kind of watch it again and be like, it doesn't hurt. Yeah. And I think success I had in powerlifting kind of healed that wound too.
Well, when you went to watch that first high school game after that big break, what things came back to you during that game that you were like, man, this is kind of awesome?
Just the atmosphere of it. I mean, just watching the kids practice and play, you know, under the nights. Friday night, like, it just makes you want to strap it up again.
Exactly. So it's, I guess what I'm getting at is a lot of times when you go through things like that, when you go back to the roots, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if, had you gone to a pro game, right? I don't know if you would have had that same feeling.
Yep.
But when you go back to Friday Night Lights and you're like, you know what, this is the shit, man. This is why you started playing in the first. Well, yeah, actually probably is, right? Because when you start as a little kid, your aspirations are to play under the lights.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And they're brainwashing you to do that too the whole time, right? And so it brings you back to that, and it takes your focus away from the political aspect and all the other business aspects to, you know, it's just kids playing a game, you know, and it's awesome. You know, that's the awesome part.
Yeah.
Then from there, you can start to appreciate the higher levels.
Yes.
Where I think in a lot of things we'll get ourselves wrapped up into endeavors and then work our way to the higher level, but then we kind of forget why it all started in the first place.
Yes.
When you go back, like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty freaking cool. You know, with myself, with powerlifting, I avoided it outside of business reasons for a long time, years. Then I went to a local meet. There was a friend of mine who was in there, saying, it's a stupid deadlift PR. I mean, it was not a bit, you know, it's not like there's a huge freaking weight, man, but it was a huge weight for them.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, this shit's cool. And this is really awesome. This is what it's really about.
Yep.
You know, you kind of get lost in that shuffle as you move through the powerlifting ranks. I mean, I assume the way that you found yourself in the USAPL was that's just the track that was the most readily available.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was a senior in high school and knew I was going to go play college football, and decided I need to get bigger and stronger for college football. Who doesn't? My dad used to powerlift years and years ago before I was born. So he got online and started you know, he'd been out of the sport forever, started looking for gyms, resources, what have you, and found a gym in Aurora, Colorado, which was about an hour and a half from where we lived. It's called Rocky Mountain Lifting Club, and Dan and Jen Gaudreau ran it and started taking me down there on the weekends, and they were, you know, USAPL gym, USAPL meets, and that was my first exposure to it, and pretty much all I ever knew.
No, that's an important point to put out there.
Yep.
Because you've been on that, I hate to say sides because it's still all powerlifting, but there's different genres. You're like, why in the hell is he lifting the USAPL? And it's like, dude, you got to go back. Like like, why in the hell do you lift in the APF? Well, because the first gym you ever trained at had lifters that lifted in the APF. This is not like a conscious decision.
Exactly.
You just end up on it, and that's the trajectory that you go to.
Yep.
It's not that complicated. You know, so from there, how long did it take you to get to qualify to the nationals, or were you already qualified because of the earlier meets? That's an open-ended question. I don't, you know, I started competing locally just for fun because I was associated with that gym. I went to college in Golden, you know, Denver suburbs. So I was still around Rocky Mountain Lifting Club, and I would go there once a week. So my exposure to the USAPL continued while I was in college. In college, it continued getting stronger. You know, I would say within 4 or 5 years of lifting heavy, being exposed to powerlifting, I was strong enough to be competitive on the national level. Well, how do you, I mean, I assume you qualify based upon a total, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you just didn't do it until, when did you hit your first nationals? Was it right after you qualified, or were you already qualified and kept doing local meets because of work or whatever?
I'll bet you for the first 2 or 3 years, I just did local meets out of the convenience and being focused on football.
Yeah.
I think my first nationals was, it was when I was in college.
Okay.
And the first nationals I did was a bench nationals, and it was because it was in Denver.
Yeah. When was the first full nationals? I don't want to say the bench nationals don't count, but it's a little different.
My CTE from football is kicking in, but
yeah. Well, fuck it, it doesn't matter. So let's, whatever that is. How did you feel when you got there? So, you see what I'm saying? Because it's different.
Yeah. good. I mean, you pay attention to the guys that are winning nationals and what numbers they're doing. So, I guess, okay, my biggest memory from nationals was Palm Springs. I think it was probably 2010, 11-ish. I was still a junior, and Brad Gillingham was towards the peak of his career, and I competed in opens too to compete against Brad, and I missed a squat and then 2 benches, and I almost could deadlift for the win, but that was my first big memory of nationals was Brad.
So when you came out, the first time you knew there's a shot to be able to win.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So what's that week look like before?
Honestly, all of the nationals were in the summer, which was my football off season.
Yeah.
And so I was training like a football player in the off season and trying to lift heavy at the same time.
Okay, I get it. So it's a sub sport.
Yeah.
So it's really not, I don't want to say you didn't care, but not caring that much about it because football was going to start.
Yep.
From there. And just to backtrack real quick, you didn't just get your bachelor's, you also got a master's degree, while you were there, and that was in petroleum engineering, or what's the bachelor's and what's the master's?
Yeah, the bachelor's is petroleum engineering and the master's is engineering and technology management.
Okay, so engineering and technology management. So I'm putting that out there because, just for those people that say you should never have a B plan. There you go. I think that's another important thing to put out there. Now, when football's gone, then it's just powerlifting, and then you're going to that nationals. What's that week feel like? Before
feels like a football game almost. I'm a nervous person. I get extremely nervous. Even the week before, training wise,
We'll forget that. That's
okay.
Week, yeah. We'll
so just like mentally.
Yeah, mentally.
Working a full-time busy job, so managing that during the day, managing the training in the evening. But I mean, every waking moment of my life outside of work revolved around lifting, training, getting to the gym, getting my meals in.
Okay, so there's the path to go down there. Is most of the time, because you've lived in, so it was Colorado's where you went to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then was it Oklahoma for work?
Wyoming for a year.
Wyoming.
Oklahoma for about 6 years, and now back in Wyoming for 5 years.
So most of that time, you're training by yourself. Most of it. How do you do that? I mean, obviously you did it. There's videos to say it, but raw I get. Right now, you start putting the gear on. How do you manage that? Like, how do you get your straps pulled up?
So the biggest step for me was in my videos. I have those spotting tables on the side that I had made, and really I trusted those more than spotters. Yeah. So like not having spotters wasn't my concern. I did plenty.
Forget the spotters. Like, how do you get your straps up?
Well, so for plenty of years and sessions, I did many squats over 1,000 pounds, and I had to use a loose suit.
I get it.
And terrible knee wraps. I couldn't sit down and flex my quad, have a straight leg, and get a tight wrap. So honestly, it was loose suit and loose wraps. Yeah. Which probably taught me some bad habits in the suit. But then at some point, when I was in Oklahoma, I got a really good helper to come wrap my knees and get my straps up on squat night, and then a handoff guy on bench.
Okay. And then on to Wyoming then. Now you don't have that. I mean, you're in the middle of bumfuck, right?
Yeah. So that was my biggest fear moving to Wyoming is, I had a guy to help me on squat and bench in Oklahoma. Moving to Wyoming, I didn't know what I was going to be able to do. I had a couple old lifting buddies from when I lived there before, but life happens, they get busy. Yeah. So my wife learned how to wrap knees and pull my straps up for squat, which was better than me doing it myself. And then on bench, she was able to give me bench handoffs, and bless her heart, she that
works to a point.
It worked. It was good because she wasn't nearly strong enough or understood the shirt how I needed it, but I'd go to meet and it was great. Okay. And then and then I had two more guys in Wyoming that depending on work schedules, they'd be able to come help me get lift-offs too.
So motivation obviously is not a problem.
No.
Motivation and discipline is not a problem because you're going to figure out how to do it. which there's another takeaway for you guys, you know, by yourself
Yeah.
through the whole thing, where we hear a lot of excuses, right, from a lot of people as to why they can't do certain things. You know, here you are, you know, sitting here with all the records that you've had, you know, squatting by yourself, essentially, you know, benching by yourself in gear, you know, which is, people that don't understand is the bench shirt still kind of is boggling me a little bit. Like, how do you get that on? Because it's single back it's closed back. It's single ply.
So I think learning to do gear by myself in the squat suit hurt because I used a loose suit, and I think I got bad habits from it. I think the bench shirt, you know, in a way helped. So when I was benching by myself, I would just have to use a loose shirt, so like loose sleeves.
You're still 400 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, it was awkward and uncomfortable, but I was, you know, I'd get the sleeves on first and get it over my head and get wiggled down.
Okay, so now you're in it, right?
Yeah, but so the bench shirt, I learned to use a loose shirt in a tight fashion. That I'll give it up to you which rabbit holes you want to go down, what you care about on the podcast. But
well, let's how do you jack it up then at that point? So it's a big shirt. I mean, twisting the arms. What are you doing to make it tighter?
So I would wear the sleeves lower on my arms. And I mean, there was times where
so even with that, how do you pull the sleeves lower? The shirt's on you now. Are you using like vice grips in a power rack to grab the sleeve?
It was loose. I mean,
okay, I get it.
It was loose.
All right.
But because it was so loose and big, I was like, what can I do with this thing? So I started wearing it real low.
Okay.
And the sleeves, you know, depending on how you get set up, you can make them stick there.
Yeah. And then the neckline. So just basically jacking up a shirt, however you jack it up. So that makes sense now, right? And that makes a lot of sense. And now that answers a lot of questions because it's easier to get off. I'm like, how do you get it off? But now I get it, right? It's not that big of a deal. Now, if you pulled it up, you're touching 2 1/4.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. That makes sense. Now, with the lift off, like I said, that works up to like 700 pounds. Then after that, it doesn't work.
Yep.
You know, so I assume just scooting closer to the racks, you know, shit like that.
Yeah. And, you know, being in a blue collar town, I had a fabricator, welder buddy. I had all kinds of ideas to come up with about, like, you know, swinging the rack away and different contraptions on the bench to try and, you know, because the hard part is getting it out here, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So you understand.
No, I get it. So and did you make lever arms then?
Yeah, I tried all kinds of different stuff. Nothing ended up working.
Yeah, because it's like a monolift for like the mono hooks, you know, for a bench. It kind of helps, but you can't get your lats tight.
Yep.
You know, it's a weird thing.
Yep.
Where that's where I was going to go with that, because if you have the lever arms, then you figured out how to get your lats tight from that position. What did you do? But it sounds like you didn't figure it out either.
No.
Because that becomes one of the things there. With that leads to, you know, you about tearing your arm off, right? And then, so that was nasty.
Yeah.
Missing the rack and stuff like that. How many times did that happen before?
So it happened when I was getting ready for Worlds in 2016, I believe it was. And something about my re-rack or where I was carrying the bar changed in a couple months before that, because I probably had 5 or 6 close calls, squatting easy, and I just couldn't get it back in the rack. Close calls to where I either almost chopped my arm off, like the one time, or a buddy that was there had to come and run and try and lift it back in the rack, or I dropped the bar. So before I cut myself, it probably happened 3 or 4 times. And after I cut myself, before I fabricated something, it probably happened another 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. I mean, now you have straps like that catch it.
Yep.
Where, go ahead and explain that real quick so people understand what we're talking about, then I'll go from there.
Sure. So just trying to come up with ideas to lift safer and squat safer without spotters. Essentially, it's like a seatbelt mechanism that I had built onto this giant fabrication thing that follows my bar, and it works like a seatbelt to where it can travel down freely, like a seat belt, if you pull it all the way out, you know, and you come back in, it's ratcheting. So these things, as soon as they start traveling down, and there's any more up movement, they're locked. So it allowed me to travel down freely, but as soon as there's any up motion, it wouldn't allow me to go back down. So I could squat freely and go back in the rack, and I never had to use them, fortunately, but in the event I missed the rack, it would have caught it. And same with the bench, because, you know, there's a lot of times where you can't get it locked and get it back in. They would stop it from falling.
My question with those are, because you have to use a 20 kilogram bar, which I'll explain that in a second too. Does it stabilize the bar at all?
No, because it's so, I mean, no.
Okay, because that would be my concern if, you know, if I'm advising you, like if it even takes any of that whip out, which some people would think is good, but it's not, because that's part of your, unfortunately, it's part of your sport, then you're screwed. Yeah. Because you go to the meet and there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's allowing the bar still to be the bar, which is bullshit. But I'll explain. Okay. All right. This will be my rant for you, right? He's using a 40 kilogram bar, which is basically just like a 45-pound power bar for all three lifts, which I understand the argument on both sides. You know, it's especially now that bars have evolved tremendously, you know, to 60-pound squat bars, you know, and hell, I used to sell the mass, and I think it was 65 people. I should know this. I didn't even play football and I was a CTE, right? And then, you know, deadlift bars with more pull. So there's 3 different bars. You guys use the same bar, which has an appeal, doesn't. So you're a bigger person, right? The weights cause the bar to whip, and better bars are going to whip. Even with a better bar, you're still going to start to get whip at 700 pounds on the squat.
Yep.
I'm at 1100. You know, there's not only whip, but there's a little. Here's a question for you. There's definitely going to be a little more whip and more stability, but does it roll the way that, because the fatter bars roll a lot? Does that still roll on you?
I don't fully understand the roll part.
All right. So if with the roll part, let's say the bar's thicker, right? After you take a pick, especially the way that you squat, because it's a lower bar squat, right as you start to like arch into it and start to squat down, the bar starts to roll down your back just a little bit, because it doesn't really naturally sit in that crease really well.
Right.
Just a slight roll. Do you feel that?
So I've never squatted with the thicker, heavier bars, so I can't compare it. But what you're getting at is it was the hardest thing that I had to deal with while lifting was that, and I didn't call it a whip, because at some point it's not a whip like you see, like it starts to oscillate. I think what happens is the weight is so far below the center of gravity on that bar, it's bent so much that it at some point it starts oscillating and it doesn't stop. And so once, and it's the scariest thing I've dealt with, and I think it's what caused a lot of my back injuries, is when my biggest squats, like going down and coming up wasn't the concern. It was, you know, you have that much weight just oscillating a little back and forth while you're going down. I mean, I'm trying to manage my balance and not fall is what the challenge became.
Yes. And then that eventually started happening. It has to happen on the bench too. But I don't know if it's so much of an oscillation as it is just, or is it oscillating?
I never felt the oscillation on the bench, and I think that's because 100% of the weight was supported wide by my hands, whereas the squat, a lot of that weight is more centered on my back, so that's going to give the bar more flex on the squat. But also, I really experienced it with the squat, say like above 1,050 pounds, and I didn't get to that in the bench.
Okay.
Weight.
Okay. This plays a huge role, right? Because let's just go to the anti-super heavyweight, right? I mean, because anybody that squats over a grand is going to have to deal with that, or 1050 is going to have to deal with that. Nobody that squats under that in lighter classes have to deal with that.
Yep.
Right. So, as you said, it becomes all of a sudden that 1135 is way more impressive than people actually. It's not just the 1135. It's not killing yourself, controlling it, you know, because it is trying to pitch you all over the place to where, you know, I wonder, like, if you get used to that, even a 55-pound squat bar, it gives you a little bit more room to put your hands out, just a little bit more.
Yep.
Because where do you grab this? I mean, can you even get your arms inside? Well, I guess you can, because legally you have to.
Yeah.
But how much of a pain in the ass is that?
It hurt the shoulders, but it's not as big of a problem as I see it for some people. And I think that's because I knew it was a constraint of how I compete and where I compete, that I had to do it. So I just made it work.
Okay. So how long has it been since you've been under a squat bar right now?
2 weeks, but before that was about 3 months.
What was it like getting under the bar after 3 months?
Not that bad. And before I really hurt myself, I was weighing 400.
Yeah.
And I'm, down to 340-ish now. And it was crazy it was much easier to get back under the bar after I dropped weight. And I don't know if it had to do with
probably
body weight or what.
Yeah. I want to ask, well, what do you think you could have done if you used, but that's not relevant, right? Because you still have to get used to it and all the other kind of things. But I do wonder how much, you saw Stu, right, with your back. And, well, how is your back doing?
Not good.
Not good. So define not good. Like just training wise, it's not good, but everyday life, it's fine.
It depends on the day. It hasn't debilitated me to where I can't do what I enjoy everyday life, but there's a lot of days where it hurts. It hurts to put socks on or lean over. But for the most part, it doesn't bother me day-to-day life. And I'm just dealing with a couple things. There's the disc stuff, which is pretty common, which has gotten worse since my vertebrae issue in 2020, but it's a day-to-day thing.
How long has it been since you worked with him or started working with him?
I first saw him summer of 2017.
Okay. So that got you a few more years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after the few more years, now it's just, is it progressively getting worse or is it just mitigating?
It's progressively getting worse.
All right. Is that why you're dropping the weight?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And what course of action do you perceive in the future?
It's tough because there's there's two separate things. There's the discs and then there's the bone. This is something I talk to my wife about almost every day. And some days are good and some days are horrible. And she's seen me in the lowest of emotional lows dealing with it. A lot of time, like we were talking earlier, the stages of grief, like I've in denial, been through denial. Deep down, I still want to load up 1,200 pounds and squat. And a lot of days I'll be feeling good and I'm like, I can do this again. I can get there. And then, a lot of times now anymore, it's like 1 step forward, 3 steps back. It's always, the whole career has been about managing how many steps forward versus how many steps back, injuries and all that. And now it definitely feels like the steps are net more backwards for sure.
But it still didn't answer. Do you think that, you don't, obviously nobody can predict the future, but do you think that you're looking at surgery?
No,
you're not going to do that,
no.
Right? So that's kind of off the table. Then it's just, how you can mitigate your life so you can just live comfortably.
Yeah.
And then still find a way to be somewhat of an idiot in the weight room to be able to satisfy, the inner beast that's still in there, because it's still there. Where the other option of, coming back into the sport, that's how hard is that now battling compared to 2 years ago?
It's not any easier.
Yeah.
COVID year was actually kind of good because it happened in March 2020, and then COVID happened in the world. It was easy because no one was competing.
Yeah.
So if I think about it deep down, in a logical, emotionally steady state, I'm usually of the belief that I doubt that I can, get back to where I was and have a healthy back.
So kind of like when you came to the end of your football career, right? Like
Yep.
I don't see you as being somebody that's going to come back and compete recreationally. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
I don't see 5 years from now you competing as a master. Well, actually, you can be a masters now. It's like 32, right? But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, being the masters athlete because of where you were at that time. But I guess the question I'm getting at is, a couple of years ago, that possibility factor might have been like 90, 95%,
Mm-hmm.
where now that possibility factor is like 40, 50%.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be there, by the way. I'm just going to tell you that. It's always going to be there. Right? That's kind of always part of that. But the problem arises when it's, say, like, between the 45, I'm just making numbers up, by the way. This Cole's no, you're an engineer and shit. It's throwing numbers out. Don't hold me to any of this. But between 45 and 70%, when it's in there, but then you're not mitigating other life factors. Like, it's there, but I got to stay 380, right? Because if I stay 380, then I'm in striking range of that 400. So when things come back, you know what I'm saying? That was probably the last couple years after.
Yep.
Like, I got to stay in striking range so I can't get too low. When that possibility factor drops, those other things get addressed. Let's bring the body weight down. Let's see if that helps. Let's bring this down. We'll talk about coaching here too. Let's lean into the coaching a little bit more, to see if that can kind of bridge. You start looking for different ways to kind of bridge the gap. But then training wise, that's the tough one.
Yep.
That's the tough one because you got to figure out that, because like bodybuilding stuff doesn't cut it. I mean, it doesn't. So let's go with that, right? So over the last, how's your training been? Just forget the powerlifting, but just how's your training been in the past 6 or 9 months? I mean, is it awful because all you're doing is going in and doing like stupid shit?
It's been really weird, and there's just ups and downs, highs and lows, because when I'm going through a phase where my back's really aggravated and I know I can't load it, over the last few years since it's been bad, I've come up with all these, I don't know, grandpa exercises where I can train my legs and not load my spine at all, like sissy squats, leg extensions, leg curls, doing all kinds of stuff on the cable machine where I'm just fighting the cable weight, not my body weight plus gravity plus a bar. I mean, I spend just as much time and effort in the gym as I always have, but it doesn't scratch the itch, I'm hanging on to whatever I can without feeling like I'm making my back worse.
Yeah.
But then I'll go through a period where it's like, okay, back's healthy, things are feeling good, start loading the bar conservatively. And those, I've had blocks of time where I can go a few weeks loading the bar up, more weight each week. And even though it's far less than what I used to do, I've really enjoyed those weeks. I can release that monster a little bit and feel good because you're back to making progress. And then, I'll get a few good weeks in a row, and then it's.
Have you found consistency in how many of those weeks you can string together?
Nope.
All right, so it could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 6. There's no rhyme or reason, because all the other little crap that you're doing is helping you live the rest of your life more pain-free. Doesn't scratch the itch, but it's also not preparing you for anything, right?
Yep.
That's the worst part, because your whole life you've been doing training to prepare you for something.
Exactly.
So have you found anything that can prepare you for, even if it's like a close grip incline press with, is there anything that you've played around with?
Mentally, I'll say played around with. I always knew I was going to have to scratch the itch and do something competitive. And at first it was thinking about, well, what stuff has all this heavy lifting through life prepared me for that I could be relatively competitive in, but not jack my back up worse. And I was like, arm wrestling. I never played with it at all, but the closest I've got, I would say, is equipped benching. I probably went 2+ years without throwing the shirt on, and I had a couple period week there where I threw the shirt on by myself in the gym and just kind of feeling some weight again. And that's been the closest I've gotten to like I think I can get up here and do this again. And this is something that it's, I could see myself prepping for.
Mm-hmm. But, right, let's throw the but in there. And let's say it is that route, and then is your brain going to default into, I'm a super heavyweight and I need to be 380 pounds? Or can you flip it in such a way that I wonder what I could do at 275 or 308?
Yep. I mean, I don't have an answer because I've thought all that stuff. And my wife, she hears me bitch and moan and complain and go through all the emotional phases of thinking through this stuff because I've thought about that. I'm like, part of me is scared to, sign up for a meet or say I'm going to do a meet because I just have that flip inside of me where I might be like, I'm getting back to 400 and it starts with bench, but then it's going to be, let's throw the squat suit on. And, so part of it's scary because as soon as I open that door, I don't know if there's a good pathway down it. I've mentally thought about the idea of like, okay, there's a 308 weight class now in USAPL. Can I do that? You talked about competing just recreationally almost. And, my dad does it now. And I see a lot of other people. It's like they're lifting and competing because they just enjoy it. I'm like, can I do that? I don't know. So I'm probably not answering your question. And it's because these same thoughts are things that I think about all day, every day.
No, I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying because I've been through that road, right? And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I made is it's not about the door open and close, right? Because it's the way I've always thought about it was kicking the door open. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you're doing this, you're going to kick the fucking door open. And there's going to be you're going to break another door through it.
Yep.
You don't have to have the door all the way open. You just need to have it enough to be able to scoot through, right? Not saying to compete, right? What I'm saying is maybe you're making it too complicated. Maybe it just becomes, what's the exercise that you can do that you can still work up into the strain, because it's the strain. That's what I found. It's the straining. It's not the meats. It's not that. It's that fucking strain. When you know you can do it, you're confident then you can do it, and you take it out and you're confident you can do it. But just for that millisecond, you don't think you can, then you get pissed because you thought that. Yep. Whatever that is, that could be as simple as like a shirt with a 2-board with a close grip. Anything that you can just push like a motherfucker as hard as you can, but you won't get hurt. Or you minimize that. Yeah. Then whatever that is, that just becomes your new squat. Or your new bench or your new deadlift. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got this stupid thing. For me, it's a reverse band spider bar squat on a high box. I mean, it is what it is, right? It doesn't, who gives a shit, because it's the strain. Yeah. Then it's like, okay, for me to do what I want to do, I'm going to need like this prep phase. I'm going to need a peak. Then I got to go back to what I really like. Yeah. Figuring out how to get there. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be kicking it all the way open. It's like, what's the safest thing that I can go the heaviest on? Yeah. Get that itch scratched. Because you're not, even if you find it, with where you are right now, you're not going to do that in 3 weeks or 6 weeks. It's like, fuck, I'm going to have to put this shit together. The soonest I could pull it off might be 5 months, 6 months, or a year. You're right back on being meathead track again, and nobody needs to know what that thing even is. Then all the training falls, it has a reason again. Yeah. So all the stupid shit, bird dogs, all the dumbass shit that you're doing, it's like, I'm doing this so I can do my reverse band shirted whatever stupid thing. And you can do that and still be, I don't want to say all in, right? Because it's not, but enough in. Yep. Right? Because to you, all in is going to mean something to somebody else. Yeah. Completely. Where that's one of the most intriguing things that I find speaking to people is somebody's all in is only the most they've ever all been all in. Right? So you might have a power lifter that you're working with, like, man, Blaine, I am all in. And you're like looking at what they're doing. And you're thinking, dude, I am more into what you're doing currently for powerlifting than what you're doing completely. Yeah. It's not even close. Yep. So, and that's frustrating. Yeah. But you also know, say if it was arm wrestling, Let's say you decided that that's what you're going to do. Do you really want to go all into that? Really?
Right.
Now that you've already done it twice.
And that's the thing that is enough to hold me back from doing it, because I know that I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to try this arm wrestling thing out and like, go train, sign up for some competitions or whatever. Like, I know that I can't do that. It's going to, if I decide to do something, it's going to be all in. But what you were talking about with like finding that thing that you can still grind against or whatever, I think I do that subconsciously with all my, at least my upper body training, because I can still do most of my bench movements pain-free. And I have some that, I rotate through, and I'm still writing myself programs for 12, 16 weeks and progressing through it. But it's, to me, like the epitome of that, like, best feeling, just feeling on top of the world, is like hitting that world record in the meet or kicking the shit out of the Russian, or that's the thing that I live for. And trying to beat the Blaine from 3 weeks ago on some pressing movements in the gym, I absolutely enjoy that more than the old grandpa, grandma kind of training I did, but there's still a big void there, even doing that stuff.
And there will be, right? Because you're not playing in a stadium anymore either.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So you can go throw a football around with somebody in the back out here, right? And it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be there. And it's, who knows if anything else will take its place, but this cycle of indecision will drive you insane. I mean, it will. It will absolutely drive you insane.
Yeah.
Until you can find something to latch on and just be, because that beast thrives for, I don't want to say decision, but drive would probably be a better word. And when that target, there's not a target. You know what I'm saying? It's going through some of your stuff. You like bass fishing, right? So you can go search for the biggest bass in all time, but how much control do you have over what's going to be in the lake?
My wife is going to enjoy listening to this so much, because she always talks. I've for sure poured myself more into fishing than I used to be, and spent time and effort and energy on it. But and she's like, doesn't that do it for you? And it's like, there's this. No, it's not. There's just this void. That's what
I'm saying. You don't know what you're going to pull out of the lake.
Yeah.
With the training and all the stuff that you've been doing all over the years, you kind of know. You know how to prepare. Like, you can prepare your bait and all this other kind of shit, but it still doesn't. You don't know what is in there.
Yeah.
No. Where that other void, it's just a weird place.
Yeah.
And you're not the first one to kind of go through it. Right. And with all that being said, for those people who are like, oh, is he done for good? There's a lot of people that spin out and continue forward. It's just a fucked up place to be in, where the number one thing is to get back healthy so you can live a normal life and kind of go on from there. But figuring out how to mitigate all the other things in the meantime is probably the wise thing, because what'd you say, you're 340 now, which is definitely better than being 400. Yeah. So what is that, like 3 chicken shakes instead of 8?
Yeah. Well, I have enough of an appetite to be able to eat to be 340-ish. Yeah. But not 400-ish. Okay. And my body weight's gone up and down from 340 even. But
with your training over the whole time competing, it's evolved, right? And it's, from what I know, it's kind of a linear block type thing, right? And I can't say what have you learned, because when you have that type of training philosophy, you can't really go back, because it doesn't change that much. The metrics that you track change. So when you first started really paying attention, and I think this is a key point, by the way, is I think too many people, I think coaches are important. You have a coaching service, which I think is really good. I think coaching is important, but coaching has to teach you what metrics work for you, right? And if it doesn't teach you what metrics work for you, you may as well just buy an ebook and do the program from the ebook, right? Yeah. So, and the metrics change over a period of time, and preference too, if you want to be completely honest, because I hate to say this, guys, but not one program works better than another one. Sorry, there's too many people at the top that have done too many different things for reality and common sense.
Agreed.
Funny, right? The people who live and die by a certain program are the same people that are bitch and complain about how society has lost all common sense. Are they not?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that before.
No, but when you look at the people that compete at the highest level, what is the most consistent attribute amongst all of them? They learned how to figure what works out for themselves the best.
Yep.
And there is no winning program. The only winning program is your program that you designed to follow the metrics that help make you better.
Yes.
Auto-regulation would be the winning program with some semblance of phasic structure. So early, I don't want to say early in your career. Let's go two ways. Let's say early in your career and with the lifters that you're working with that are intermediate and below. What are the most important metrics that you found that they should be tracking?
I would say frequency and volume. Frequency because not just so I'm a big believer in the best program isn't going to be whatever catchphrase or the most popular one of the day is. It's going to be whatever suits them best, that they'll believe in the most and adhere to the most. So I say frequency is the first one because some people are motivated and willing to squat, bench, and deadlift 3 or 4 days a week. Some people just want to do it once a week. So I was finding what suits their life, their motivation, their schedule. That's step number one for me. And then number two, I say volume because over any period of 8, 12, 16 weeks, I think that's the one that has the most variability to go up and down, that has the biggest impact on overall strength, and the one that needs the most management due to fatigue.
So when you're speaking volume, are you speaking volume of just the main lifts or overall training volume of the whole day?
Just the compound lifts.
Okay, so the accessories are, I don't want to say they're not important, but they're left out of the conversation because that volume's tracked independently.
Yes.
Okay. And then with yourself, because you came with the football training, and then the volume. This is such a weird conversation because people get so confused over some of the simplest things. Like the better you get, like when you're, as you said, when you're starting, volume and potentially frequency too. If their technique sucks, like if their technique sucks, I can definitely see squatting 4 days a week, but it's not maximal or even sub-maximal. It's just learning technique, which not enough people spend enough time doing. That's another rabbit hole and a rant that I could go on forever. But then as you get higher, the technique becomes, it's still important, it's super important. But the volume becomes less important because you're beat up. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's upside down. Like everything that you did when you were a beginner is the exact opposite of everything you need to do when you're advanced, and vice versa. But the beginners will look at the advanced and then try to do what they're doing when it's not what they really need, and they won't look at what the advanced did to get where they're at.
100%.
The gray area is in the middle. Actually, defining the in the middle is the gray area just in itself, right? Because you can have somebody with 10 years experience, but they still suck. With the metrics, outside of those two metrics, let's move into the intermediate, because I kind of want to keep drilling the beginner part, because people are, okay, what do you think are the 3 most important things for the beginners getting into the powerlifting?
Technique.
Why?
Because as you get, and I've learned this because I was guilty of this. The stronger you get and the higher your numbers go, the harder and harder it is to make yourself correct your technique. Because you have to take weight off the bar and relearn movement patterns. So get the technique clean and correct from the beginning, and then you never in your career have to worry about spending months and months or even longer taking weight off, relearning a movement and trying to build back up. So you said the 3-mo. So technique, Can I just say technique, technique, technique?
Yes. Yeah, because I would agree 100% with that. And it's one of the things that if I have people out for a clinic, you can, it's kind of insane, right? Because you can work with them and not fix, but address technical issues. And they'll break a record, they'll break a PR, which boggles my, it's boggling to your mind, right? And these are not top advanced people, but intermediate people. And then you'll explain to them afterwards that if you just did like a 3-month technical block, like 3 technical blocks, just focus on that, you'll be so much stronger.
Yeah.
But they can't adhere to it. And I don't understand. It's like you just put 20, 30, 50 pounds on your lift because it wasn't technically sound.
Yep.
There's probably another 50 pounds, maybe 100, without you ever getting stronger, which is the hardest part of the whole thing, by the way, is actually getting stronger.
Yeah.
And they can't, they can, but they won't.
Right.
Which I don't, and everybody says the same thing that you're saying. It doesn't matter if they're raw, multiply, single ply, or whatever it is. It's the same thing. And I think if we could all go back, I was fortunate, but I still would have liked more of it, and just focused on that, which is, don't they do that? I mean, when you're in junior high playing football, don't you just work the shit out of your skills?
Well, yeah, your sports skills.
Your sports skills.
Yes.
More so than any other part of the game.
Yep.
Not in powerlifting.
Nope. And so my experience with it, and why I would say technique, I learned how to do heavy lifts in the high school football weight room, right? Which 90% chance in America, if that's your case, it's shit luck for you, because the football squat and the bench press where you're just dumping it and lifting your butt off the ground and bounce. I mean, we all know what I'm talking about, right? So generally that's how I learned. And then I got into powerlifting, and for years and years I benched like a football player. And then it's like, wait, I got to pause it and control it at the start and the finish. And you think you bench 400 pounds and you start applying the powerlifting rules to stuff, and you're like, I'm like a 300-pound bencher. And, same with squatting high or sloppy technique or not learning to brace, it's so hard once you've been doing it that way for years and getting strong to like just unravel it all. And
so how did you go from that mindset then to the person that's filming every training section and then reviewing the session like you would game film for football? So how'd that come about?
I think it came about because of how I just said it. It was like, I thought I was strong because I was still training with that football mentality when I was a young powerlifter about just lifting the most weight, right? I was like, I just squatted so much and it was this high, or I'll get it in the meat type thing. And it took a few bumps and bruises to learn, like, no, I mean, you're strong, but you got a long way to go to clean up technique. And so that's why I trained by myself. And then I started filming with 2 cameras, every angle of my lifts, and just watching them over and over again and be like, well, you're squatting high because of this. Try, open your knees up, or try doing this with your stance, and just cleaning my lifts up over time via hard.
With your engineering brain, were you looking at that more from bar path or leverages?
Absolutely both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one for you was the first place that you would look?
I would say leverages.
Okay.
Because unless your body leverages, unless you're being optimal with those, you can't affect bar path really.
All right. And that's keeping the bar in line with the center of gravity.
Yep.
Is where you're working all that from.
Yep.
And then for those that are listening, you sat back, right? So it would be the joint angle of hip, knee, ankle, right? What about the foot, dorsiflexion? Did you notice anything there?
No, I mean, I squatted in flats.
Yeah.
I think that style of squatting, dorsiflexion, is not too much of a constraint normally.
So it's rare in the IPF to squat the way that you squat.
Very.
Right? Which is sitting back and hinging and stuff like that, which can kind of lead into the depth thing. But my counter, when I think of these things, like I said, there's like two sides always going through my head. Is, okay, so you move your stance in, then how the fuck are you ever going to break that? You know, because now you're bigger, right? It's like I've seen people who are 400 pounds that I've actually put a pop can on the ground, so sit on the pop can, and they're still not breaking legal depth. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like that's ridiculous. Where and I don't want to say it's so much of a forward lean, but it's the bar's traveling over the center of gravity, which can look like a forward lean, but when you look at the skeleton, it's not as much as what people would. I mean, you watch your own videos.
Yeah,
you agree with that. Where people are going to look at it and say he's doing a good morning out of the bottom, and say, look at this guy. You know, look where all this is at.
Yep.
You once got red lighted for that, right? Did they ever explain why?
I've gotten, red lighted multiple times, especially international meets, but I had a run-in with a judge after Worlds in it was Equipped Worlds, I think in 2015, and it was a European judge, and I saw her at breakfast the next morning, and I was asking why she red lighted me. She didn't speak good English, but her response was essentially this: good squat, bad squat. Good squat, bad squat, meaning if you lean forward, it's not a good squat. So that's what I mean. Open to interpretation on the judging and just a lack of consistency and training.
That's an interesting one. You fall over backwards, right? I mean, if you did what she was saying in the position that you're in, you would fall over backwards.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna happen with the bar. Were you able to see the bar oscillating on video?
Yeah, especially from the side.
Yeah. And then what things were you able to, if you saw in the video that the bar was oscillating more than it should, what things would you do to correct that?
So that's the kind of the one thing that I was never able to figure out with the squat, was how to stop the oscillation.
Yeah.
And I've seen, there's been lifters that have squatted close, and sometimes I see it on them, sometimes I don't. So I don't know if it's a way that I set up or carry the bar. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's something I've never figured out. And once it starts, it doesn't stop.
Yeah. Now, does it happen from the pick or after you're already set up?
Sometimes it happens as early as the first step on my walkout. But it always would happen at some point of the descent.
And you were never able to figure out?
Nope.
The why really doesn't matter. It's the correction that's going to matter.
So I think that the reason I had such issue with it was because I was a slow, controlled squatter, especially in a gear. I think if you're one of those people that descends really fast and bounces out of the bottom, that it's much less of an issue, because I think.
You think?
I think so.
Because it's not going to happen until you hit the bounce?
Well,
it's still going to happen.
I think there's something about the rate of that bar coming down, because if you took that bar and just dropped it to the floor, I don't think it would have enough time to do this.
I get it. I'm still thinking it's going this way, and it's going this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So other things that you would pick up post. Now, I'm assuming that you're doing this right after you train, right? Are you doing it while you train too?
Nope.
Okay, so after you train, and then you pick up say your knees are not where they're supposed to be. You note that. Do you do down sets to work on it immediately, or you just note it for the next time?
Just note it for the next time.
Okay. Yeah. And then are you comparing the videos to the same period of time, X number of weeks out from last competition?
Yep.
Or with same weight?
Both. And I had an insanely organized way where I filmed all my videos from the same angle every week, and then I had an app that I'd use on my iPad, and I could pick like any 2 weeks and put them side by side and like anchor them. So I like start the video anchor like right when I'm descending, and then I could track them both at the exact same spot, and I would just see, look for the differences. And I really didn't do anything physical to try and change a lot of the stuff. It was, you watch something the mental reps thing. Like
Yeah.
I'd watch something over and over and over again and would be aware of it and think about it all day and go to bed visualizing it. And just over time, that was enough to correct things that I wanted to correct.
Was there any time, I mean, obviously you're probably not doing it now, right? But
Yeah.
was there any time before a meet where you didn't do that and then you realized it was important for you to do?
I don't think so. I mean, I was so obsessive about it. The one thing I had to be careful of was to not overthink. I mean, engineers overthink enough as it is, but I had to, there was a fine line about like to not do it too close to a meet. So I didn't want to, 2 weeks out, I didn't want to see something like, oh, I need to try and do this differently.
Yeah.
I just need to, here's my squat. It is what it is.
So you pulled it
Yep.
a few weeks out. All right. With the overthinking thing, with your own because programming can become a deep dive. Right, I'm sure you've been down that. It's a deep hole.
Yeah.
Was there any point in time where you said, and granted, we never stopped learning, so I'll put that out there, where you said, you know what, I know enough to be able to do what I want to do. I'm done. I'm going to go off the metrics that I have and just refine everything and just stop looking at the other shit and just focus on what you figured out.
Yep.
Okay.
I would say for sure the last couple of years of me at my peak was like that. And
yeah,
it is kind of against the EFS philosophy about always learning, always having a passion for it. But I had to be so careful about the overthinking. I was like,
but that is learning though.
That's true. That's true. I just knew there was no new exercise or program twist or way to set up bands that was going to add that next 10 pounds onto my lift.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at the peak of the peak of the peak, I felt like I had all my knobs dialed in, optimized, and like the things that I had to work on the most was like the absolute finest nuts and bolts of my competition squat, bench, and deadlift.
So I think that's, for me personally, I think that's the epitome of mastery of sport, right? When you can have everything so auto-regulated that, not saying it's perfect, but you know what knobs to play with.
Yeah.
Right? To where you can walk in the gym, and this is what I think it's lost with, the paper programming or email programming now, right? That's not pay, it's digital, right? But anyhow, that gets lost on that because you can be driving to the gym and on your way there, you're like, fucking neck don't feel right. Something, it's just a little off. My back's a little tight. So you've already now changed whatever you're going to do as soon as you walk in the door.
Yep.
Based upon what it was like driving there. Or I don't really want to do this, which happens too. So your whole warm up just changed. But if it was on the email, you have to do, I'm hardcore, I'm all in, I have to do whatever I'm told to do. You're really not, because you didn't change what you're supposed to do. All the way through your warm-up sets, this didn't feel right, so I'm sure you repeated it. That didn't feel right, you repeated it. Like, I will go up when my shoulders are ready to go up.
Yeah.
Then I'll go up. And it could mean you do the weight once. You may do it 6 times. When it feels like a plate on each end, I'll go up.
Yep.
Right now it feels like 315 or whatever. You just, and that's all. That's the whole training, right?
Yeah.
Including what happens after your main movement and so forth. You only learn that by paying attention to those details and listening to yourself and being honest and realistic with yourself, which is another problem people have, and kind of knowing the basics of training. And it's so a lot of the things that I see people miss is they don't learn the basics of just what super compensation is, what peaking is. They don't learn that, because if they learned that, a lot of the debate that we see go on at different training methodologies would stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really, and you know how low hanging fruit that is to learn, right? It would completely stop. And then they don't learn the other end of that, where once you get it, I think it's over-analysis by paralysis, because then you start looking for either ways to, two pipes happen. You look for ways to justify your bias, right? Or you look for ways to keep getting better, but it becomes endless because it never stops.
Yep.
Or you figure this is working, you know, and go that route. How long do you think it took you to get to that point?
Man, that's tough because when you're in the moment,
Yeah.
you're not thinking about it from the outside looking in. You're just, but yeah, I guess my first meet was 2006, and I feel like I probably got to the point that we're talking about around probably not till 2016 or 17.
Because it's the other thing that can happen when you get to that point is you start to be realistic about what actually needs to be in there and what doesn't, and why.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is in there because it's fun.
Yep.
That's it. This doesn't need to be in there. The training economy becomes a better part of it. And that's not saying that you're still not looking for other ideas, you know, because past that time you went to Westside, you know, and picked up some ideas there, but you're not picking those ideas to change your philosophy.
Right.
You're looking for it to add gaps.
Exactly.
Or there was probably, let me ask you this. Was there something that you were looking for in your programming to fill a gap of that you were hoping that you would learn by going there or find?
Yep. I mean, to this day, I guess the lowest hanging fruit I feel like I'd still left on my career was figuring out my deadlift lockout. And I still haven't figured it out. I don't know if it was like a weakness or a movement pattern. And that's kind of why it was my main impetus of going to Westside and reaching out to other people. Cause, I'd pulled 900 quite easily to above my knees, but struggled to lock out 800. So I felt like there was always another 100 pounds on my total from that deadlift lockout that I could never quite figure out. And I never did. So that's kind of the last piece I was trying to find.
Was there anything there that made you think that there was an answer to that?
Yeah. Louis thought I had a low back weakness and thought the recipe for it was, you know, like 5 days a week of 50 reps on the reverse hyper type stuff. So I didn't 100% agree with it, but say 75% of the way. And it was a new angle to look at because I'd never considered like maybe all the training and the style that I lift, like maybe I just have like super weak relative low back or something to, you know, I'd say most of the time I spent addressing it was like technique and not just saying like, maybe I'm just really weak somewhere and I strengthen that up doing crazy stuff. And that's the answer. So,
well, obviously the lower back kind of played into that, right? Because the pathology kind of suggests that there's a problem with the lower back that played into it. What other things did you pick up while you were there? Or let me not put that. What things were not what you thought?
So I would say there's two big ones. The first was band tension. You read it all over the internet. Like you don't understand Westside and conjugate until you go there. And I was for sure guilty of that because I've used bands and dynamic effort work for forever. And I went there and it was like, I'm using like a third of the band tension that I should be using for my strength. So that was the big one. And the second was, and we kind of talked about it earlier, I figured Westside was going to be all about drugs and gear. And at least my exposure to it and spending time with Louis was not. I mean, he was all about getting stronger and stronger. And then you put the gear on for the meet, which again, I didn't completely agree with, but a lot different than what I thought it would be.
Well, when you went from raw to single ply, and single ply of today is not what it was of, 20 years ago, and neither is multiply and so forth. It's another layer of complexity. Right. So you have the raw training, and I'm not going to say that's easy, right? But it has its own complexities involved with that on how to periodize and program and all that. And now you get the gear, right? Which now there's a whole nother level, because say a bencher, you're going to need over 80% or whatever, just unless to have it jacked up to be able to get it to touch. Well, you can't stay that strength year round, right? So you got to figure out how to program. The squat suit's probably a little bit easier than the bencher. Would you agree with that as far as the programming there? Because it straps down, straps up, wraps, and being wide, the wraps aren't going to help as much as. Well, I'll ask you: did the wraps help you very much?
No, I was terrible with them. But
I think it's because when you sit back like that, you don't have the leverage from the wraps. It's coming more from the suit.
I would agree.
Knees travel forward. You're going to get more of the wraps, but you're not going to get as much out of the suit. So. Where are you going to get the most? 400 pounds, big belly, good leverage, It's a simple answer. So that's another funny thing that just hits me. It's like, well, if you took the reps off, how much are you squat? Well, what do you squat like? Probably the same. But the bencher becomes that added layer, which for your engineering, geek mind, that you have to love that.
Yep.
So now it's another problem, right? How do you fix that problem? So what did you find worked for cycling and shirt work?
I'm just going to refer any questions I ever get anymore to you. Cause
Yeah.
you explained why I loved gear in the first place. It's another knob to twist.
Yeah.
It's just another layer of complexity to figure out, which I enjoyed. But my answer to staying peak strength and getting what I needed to out of the shirt might not align with, kind of some of the stuff you referenced, but I almost felt peaked year round. Like even after I just finished my biggest meet and I had another 12 weeks before my next meet, I mean, I was already in the shirt again, heavyweight, because I treated the shirt as something that I had to have absolute mastery of with my opener.
Mm-hmm.
And there's such a big difference between like you're an inch or two away from touching versus actually touching and being
Mm-hmm.
able to lock out. So it was dialing in what's the most that I can lock out but still light enough to touch,
Mm-hmm.
and just worrying about increasing that over time. So almost weekly I was in like.
So once you got that figured out, you never let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the key.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Now, how much would your body weight fluctuate from off season, preseason?
It wouldn't. It was
the
amazing.
same.
I stepped on the scale every night, and I mean, it doesn't seem possible. I was like 1 or 2 pounds difference.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, what you were doing, I get what you were doing. You're controlling all the variables. You can control the same, right? Except for the ones that you're trying to fix.
Exactly.
Right. And that
Exactly.
makes sense. What are some of the other variables? I mean, the nutrition you were controlling, that's obvious, the way that was laid out. It's pretty
Yep.
simple to control. And then the shirt work, the body weight. What were some of the other things that were controlled that way?
Everything, sleep, as much of my work schedule as I could control, working around when my wife could be at the gym, or Trevor, someone helped me be at the gym. I mean, every single knob in life that you could control, I was having to control it.
So which ones were the most variable? That were the harder to control?
I would say work, sleep, and injuries.
Yeah. Sleep, how so?
Go to bed at like 8 p.m. and wake up when I had to for work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just absolutely next level religious about 8 to 9 hours of sleep.
No,
a
I'm
night.
saying, how was that a variable that was difficult to control?
Because work sometimes,
Okay.
middle of the night phone calls or late nights, early mornings.
All right. And then did you have to adjust the training in any way to accommodate for that, or it was just screw it, push through?
Yeah,
Okay.
just push through. I don't know if I would recommend that, but that's what I did.
Okay. And then the other variables were sleep was one of them that you just said. My brain just freaking fizzled out. So there was 3 that you noted. Sleep. Oh, come on, Dave. What was those?
Injuries?
Injuries. Well, I'm leaving that one for.
Like training schedules of my wife, or
Yeah, and that's infrequent.
Yeah.
So those are kind of easy to move around.
Yeah.
How many days a week were you training?
5 to 6, five normally.
Is 5 the important number, or is it like 4 with an accessory day?
4
Okay.
with an accessory day.
All right, so the 5th one's variable.
Yep.
All right, most of the time it was there.
Yeah.
And how did that lay out with your work schedule? Were you training on the weekends, or would you keep those free?
I would usually do my secondary dynamic effort bench day on the weekend.
Okay. And then everything else was during the week. And then your work schedule, is it shift? I mean, how is it laid out?
It's a kind of regular type hours,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some late nights or early mornings, or sometimes weekend stuff when there's problems.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not too horrible compared to what a lot of people have to deal with.
All right. Now the injury one, right? What was the first injury outside of football that you had to train around?
I would for sure say it was herniating my first disc L5S1, which I did in 2008.
Yes. And was that training through it or around it?
And you'll understand this. I've evolved so much since that point.
Yeah.
Then it was training around it.
And then how did you do that?
Yeah, I was so incompetent compared to how I am now with dealing with my back. And I mean, dealing with back stuff is so risky because you can run into the wrong doctor that will jack your life up for good.
Yeah.
So really I spent from 2008 until 2017 working around the tweaks. I would tweak a disc, tweak the same disc. I would learn what did it, and I started to figure out, like, okay, this is the kind of stuff that I can't do because it's going to bother my disc.
Explain to me what a tweak is. Like, what's that feel like?
So it was tweaking my L5S1 disc, and it's bulged, and it sticks out close to the nerve there. And if I loaded my spine wrong or did something, it would just, that disc hits that nerve, and then I would be.
Feels like a pop.
Yep. And almost feel immobile for 1 to 3 weeks.
Yes. So then so it pops. Let's just say it pops.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're in a quadruped on the floor, right? Okay. And then it slowly gets better over time as you put more blood. So how did you, let's say you boom, you're on the floor. What's the rest of that day look like?
Just trying to survive. Just, meeting my work obligations and trying to.
So a lot of bracing to be able to get in and out of everything.
Yep.
Icing, did that make any difference?
No, I didn't do ice or heat too much. Sometimes I would do heat, but.
Did you try to compress it?
No. I did phases where I tried the inversion tables, but.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying the day that it's bad.
Oh.
Like, are you putting like your weight belt on just to like get in the truck?
I never thought about doing that, but it's been a good idea.
Yeah.
But it was a long time after that until I even learned about bracing and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So this whole time up before there, and you just putting the belt on as tight as you can,
mm-hmm.
and just lifting shit.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Because you kind of inherently are learning about it, because when your back's jacked, when you go to squat down, you're flexing your abs, right? Because you can't do it any other way, because it hurts like hell.
Mm-hmm.
Or getting in the truck and stuff like that. So you still went about. And then each day it gets a little better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then did you ever have a time where you started to realize that if you started to put more blood in it sooner, it can get better faster? So did you ever, I guess what I'm asking, were you able to take the 3 weeks down to a week?
No.
Okay.
To me, it seemed to be most variable on how bad the tweak was. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes I could. This is before I knew the McGill stuff, but
mm-hmm.
I could tweak it doing something stupid like leaning forward improperly,
mm-hmm.
which wouldn't, maybe that was like a 1.5 week tweak.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I did it squatting or deadlifting, that was like a bad 2 or 3 week tweak.
Yeah. But you're still benching and doing all the other stuff that you can do.
Exactly.
Okay. And so once you learned with that one, once you learned to not train through, right? Because I'm sure with that, as soon as it started to feel 50% and you could put your belt on and it just hurt, but didn't hurt the movement pattern, you're probably doing the squat.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So when the ignorance left from that, how did you go about managing after that?
Just jump back in. Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't. You didn't change anything after. So now when it tweaks, you're not. You see what I'm saying? So after, how am I going to ask this? At some point, you learned to brace.
Yes.
Okay. So did that cut down? This is going to be a fucked up question that a lot of the back people aren't going to like. So once you learn some of those things, did it make you be able to go from like the 3 to 4 weeks down to 2 weeks because you could brace better?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Because when that tweak was on, I mean, that one was like a switch. It was
mm-hmm.
like on or off.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had tweaked it horribly 2 weeks ago, squatting a ton of weight, and 2 weeks later it felt fine, I was like back under 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, unlike some joint or shoulder or hip stuff where it's like, yeah, it hurts, but I can push through. For me, the back tweaks were always like, I'm either like immobile or I feel decent enough.
Yeah, so you can still do most
Yeah.
with it. There's so many of these questions I'm trying to walk a fucking fine line on, because it's when I know what some of the recommendations are when you're in the position that you were in, like one of the biggest ones, right, is, not training for a long period of time. And you didn't do that. You know that. What was your thought process on not doing that? And do you think that you should have?
So are you talking about the vertebrae?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just not training for 6 months, 7 months, something like that.
Yep.
At all.
Yeah. Which was McGill's recommendation, in his words, to live like an engineer. And
like an engineer, yeah.
And in his defense, unfortunately, he's been right about everything.
Yeah.
About, so his thought was to let that vertebrae heal, you have to completely unload it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew mentally, like, I couldn't do that. I was like, and I had lots of conversations with him on Skype about, like, well, what about this? And he knew where I was going, and he was not going to enable me. But anyway, I didn't follow his recommendation 100%. I knew I would go completely insane if I just lived like an engineer. So during that time of 6 to 8 months of not loading it is when I came up with ways that I felt truly were fine to safely do on my vertebrae, but still train. So, like, I have a cable machine in the gym that has the arms that go up, down, all the angles, and just I figured out ways to train every body part where if you're standing or sitting doing dumbbell curls or overhead press, you have your body weight plus gravity plus the dumbbells. I could figure out all kinds of ways on the cable contraptions to where I was laying prone, so I had no body weight on it, no gravity, and just the cable resistance. And I was like, I convinced myself, like, doing this is less stress on my back than just standing upright. So did that.
It will kind of, but what I'm trying to get at is that kind of goes a little bit against the other things, like the chicken shakes 100% to gain weight.
Yeah.
The over obsessiveness of the videos to be able to become the, better technically sound, the, spreadsheet from hell, to be able to track all your training for 15 years, all this other stuff that's kind of all in for the competitive thing. And then this hits where that all in for the competitive thing, you don't buy in, right?
Yeah.
To where that makes me wonder if the main drive is the competitive thing, or if the main drive is what you're searching for in the training in the weight room.
Yeah. I don't know. The thing mentally why I couldn't just not lift was just the thought of withering away.
I know, but see, that thought of withering away just trumped the thought of being the world champion.
Yeah. I've never thought about it like that, but I just know, like, mentally I was like, my wife is going to kill me or kick me out of the house, or I'm going to kill somebody if I can't do something.
Yeah. I mean, when we were talking earlier, trying to figure out, why and all this other kind of stuff, I think it's part of your answers there. Trying to figure out why that decision was made is going to provide a lot of clarity on where you want to go from here.
Yeah. Because
that's the one thing that went above that. So it wasn't about the Russians. It wasn't about the world record. It wasn't about any of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I just fucked with your head even worse. But.
Yeah. I think at that point it was because I was still maybe in that 85 or 80 to 90 confidence range that there's, like, I'm still going to get back after all this. And was able to convince myself, like, if I do all this prone stuff with cables, I can hang on to as much muscle and strength as I can. And deep down, I didn't feel like I was doing anything bad to my back, that I was still letting the vertebrae heal, so that, all right, I'm gonna let this vertebrae heal, and then I'm gonna be back at it. I'm just going in the emotional circles still.
No, kind of, but at least you're in it. You know what I'm saying? That's a different thing with that, is knowing that you're in it. With, to kind of get away from that with the labrums, like how did that change your training? I mean, you went into gear, but before that, so did you win Worlds Raw?
2012.
I don't know if I look back that. So you did that. So that was a big change, right? Going from that, because I believe in 2012, correct me if I'm wrong, Raw was more popular than single ply. Is that, or is it about even?
I think in the IPF world, Equip was still a little more popular, but it was right around there where things started to flip.
It's a weird time. So it was an even decision. It didn't make it one way or another with that. How did that change the training? Obviously, it just hurt like a bitch, right? And did you see a path to be able to continue Raw, or was it too symptomatic to be able to do that?
So I actually continued competing Raw until 2015, but after my first hip labrum, it went downhill. Like squatting Raw was just, some weeks it was like a 7 out of 10 pain. Some weeks it would be a 5 or 6. So almost all my training became in the suit at that point.
Did they suggest surgery?
So I only saw one doctor, and when I was in Oklahoma City when I was dealing with the hip labrums. I got the MRI done, and he said they couldn't repair it arthroscopically because I have too much meat, that they'd have to cut through the glute to get in there to repair it. And if they did it that way, he said there's no way I'd ever get back to what I was doing because of having to cut through the glute. So I never got a second opinion on it or anything. It was just a pain that I felt fine dealing with.
How does it feel day to day?
If I sit for a while, drive or whatever, and get to stand, it hurts real bad, and it still, bothers me.
Have you had it looked at since?
I haven't. I think it's just one of those things where I'm just so used to the pain.
Now, when you put the suit on, the pain goes away, or it's just...
I haven't figured it out if the pain goes away, or there's just so much other pain that pain becomes less. But it was much better in the suit.
It's kind of like when you put on I use super, super hot liniment. Sometimes I don't know if that really is doing anything, except now I'm so focused on how hot it is that I forget about the other shit, with that. So when you say the other pain with the gear, just the quads?
Yeah.
Just the tension of that?
The suit biting into you and 1,100 pounds on your back and all that stuff screaming.
Now, after the squat session, you take the stuff off. Are your hips screaming?
No.
Okay. And then with the shoulders, what does that feel? What is the symptoms there?
I'm pretty fortunate with the shoulders. Like if I tried to bench with a flat back and flare my elbows, my shoulders would hurt. But general bench pressing, my shoulders aren't in horrible shape.
Okay. So when you had to work around the shoulders, the hips, and the back, what are some examples of how you worked around those?
Sure. The biggest one was finding the pain-free range of motion that I could keep strong and strengthen. So, for example, like the raw squat, it was like that deep squat position that really killed my hips, and it was probably because that was where I tore them, in the deep raw squat position. So I could do like pin squats or pause squats a little above parallel with very little pain. So and same with the shoulders. Like if there's a bottom end range of motion that really hurts the shoulders, I would do like pin presses or boards or something. Because generally, at least my experience with the joint stuff, it's a very specific range of motion that really hurts it. So I would just find ways to do exercises that I could load up just as heavy and push through, but stay out of that pain range.
Now, did you have to go back into that pain range the last couple of blocks before a meet?
Yep.
And then it's just, screw it, this is what I'm doing.
Yep. So for the hip labrums too, I tried to keep the whole range of motion strong, but just like eliminate that little sliver. So the hip stuff, I could do those high pin squats or whatever.
Yeah.
But then for whatever reason, I could use the yoke bar with a close stance and heels and push my knees forward and hit a deep squat, and it wasn't bad on my hips. And I realized that wasn't 100% specific to my competition squat, but it was like doing my competition squat a little above parallel and then doing that yoke bar close stance. I could push through the bottom range of motion. So
all right, with that, we'll kind of lead into this question here with your training. The way I look at any training plan is, if you have the training day, you got a main movement, right? And then whatever's after that main movement, I call supplemental exercise. And usually that's trained in the strength range, 3 to 5. So then after that, it's all the bodybuilding shit, stuff like that. Did your program basically follow that same type of sequence?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with that supplemental exercises, which supplemental exercises did you find for you personally, not your clients? It's a different question, but you personally had the greatest correspondence to the main movement?
I would for sure say pin movement. So like for squat and bench, pin movements where you're setting the range of motion a little above or whatever.
Yeah.
Just getting off of that dead.
So from the squat, are you getting under it, or are you squatting down to it?
Squatting down to it.
Okay.
I just felt like, for me, overcoming that static load had a very good carryover. And then for deadlift, I mean, I don't want to say I ever figured it out, but bands and then pulling off blocks where the bar's elevated.
So on these pin things, are they 3s, 5s, singles?
Yep, 3s, 5s.
Okay, and then you would, I assume, based upon your training philosophy, you're progressing those over a period of how many weeks?
12 weeks normally.
So 12 weeks. So it's really starting light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it's that 12 weeks out and it's the 5s, they're pretty easy 5s.
Yep.
Okay. So this is important, guys. Pay attention, right? Because a lot of people will do the same thing, but on that week 1, they're heavy 5s.
Yep.
Right. So then after like 4 weeks, they're peaked. Right.
Yep.
So I assume you're breaking it back from when would they drop out before a meet?
2 weeks.
So 2 weeks. So the 2 weeks out, you're going to want that 3, if it's still a 3, it may be a single, to be over your best.
Yep.
By how much?
It depended on what point I was at in my career. When I was...
Well, I'm saying from the time the phase started.
So
say you're laying it out over 11 weeks. You know what that 11th week should look like.
Yeah.
Are you putting like a 50-pound PR on that, or are you putting like a 5-pound PR?
5-pound.
So a 5-pound PR, and then backing it off.
Yep.
From there. Okay. Another important point, right? You know the people I'm talking about here, so I'm just kind of walking them through here.
Absolutely.
Right. So if it ends up being, let's just pick a number, 500 pounds was your best. Now it's going to be 505. Now you back that off 10 weeks at 20 pounds per week. It's a freaking joke the first week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost not even worth doing, right?
Right.
But you still do it.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So what are the pins, what were some of the other ones?
Anything with bands.
Okay. All right. So then how did you accommodate that? From the bar to the band, or are you just like throwing shit against a wall and just making it consistent?
Throwing shit at a wall and making it consistent.
Okay.
I never calculated the percent of band tension that I needed at the top and backed into it that way. I would use bands, use the same setup, and keep it consistent and grow the bar weight over time.
Okay. Now to me, the supplemental stuff always has more variability in it than what the main movement is. So if you're just killing it, after 6 or 7 weeks, do you take the bigger jump, or do you just still stay on plan?
It depends on the week. And again, this is one of the things that I might do differently than what I say. But if I had a week where it was programmed to be a heavy week and I was feeling good, I would allow myself to go over what.
Okay. Now, if there was a time to where it felt like it was really ahead of plan, did you find ways to, because 2 things can happen if you're ahead, right? One, you can just full throttle and end up burning out.
Yep.
Or the other one is you realize, wait, I'm a little bit too much ahead, and then X, Y, and Z, which usually is going to be really super conservative. Which route would you pick if things were moving faster than what you thought?
I don't have a good answer to that because I would say, I would have to go decade back to say like over a 12-week period where I saw my strength grow a lot in that. So I guess to answer your question, I always felt on track.
Yeah.
I never felt ahead or behind, because when I was at my strongest, I just would never go 12. I wouldn't even go sometimes a year where I felt like I was making progress.
Yeah. How often would you switch that supplemental movement?
Every 4 weeks.
Okay. So they're hitting in waves throughout the whole thing too. All right. Now, when we get into and I'm purposely leaving the main movement out because it's going to cycle kind of the same way, but there's other aspects involved. I'll come back to it. With the accessory stuff, how did you plan that? Just the bodybuilding extra stuff that you threw in there? Is it even planned at all would be the first question.
Yeah, it was planned, both the exercises and the sets and reps.
Okay. And what about the weight?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it wasn't planned on paper, but the last 12-week block, the last program, this 4-week block, I was doing the same exercises as this one. And so I saw what I did. Week 1, I was here last time. Can I do the same weight and one more rep type thing?
Yeah. So with the accessories, or let's just call the bodybuilding stuff that you put in there, the sets and reps are planned. How often did that change in 4-week blocks too?
Yep.
And then the reason why the weights aren't programmed is because it doesn't matter?
For the bodybuilding stuff? Yeah.
Okay, you can say that.
Yes.
Right? That's what I'm trying to get you to say. Is, I think people overemphasize that because things lead into that. Fatigue from the first two things. Like if you're dead set, I'm going to hit the dumbbell presses for X number of reps with X number of pounds, but your tricep exercise just fatigued the shit out of your triceps, and that just went by.
Exactly.
And they're not. Why were they in there for you? The bodybuilding, the accessory stuff.
A closet bodybuilder inside of me.
So it's for muscle hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Right. So in the bottom end of the training, does it matter how much weight those are?
Not for powerlifter.
I like to get so many of these things that to me it's like so simple, but so many people just miss.
Yeah.
From that. Now with the going back to the main lift, did that kind of work in the same way? Now, did you stay in the 3 to 5 range, or did you ever cycle higher than that?
So when I was in gear, it was always singles, only singles and always singles.
All right.
And raw, it was 1 to 3. If I'm doing a 12-week block, 3 is double singles.
Okay, so now we're talking, and keep in mind, guys, this is percentages too. How much weight on average is going to jump per week through the cycle for you?
Probably 3 to, I'd say on average 3. So maybe like 2 to 5%, but on average 3
per week.
Okay,
so 20, 30 pounds. So is my math about right?
Yeah.
All right. So if the people that are listening that need to take what and you're basing that off what are you basing that end result off of? Your PR, or it gets tricky at a top level. So there's a good question. Like, what did you base that off of after you already started winning worlds and stuff like that? So are you basing that off your PR? Are you basing that off of what you wish you could do, or a little bit under what you think you should be doing?
I would say an accurate PR.
An accurate PR.
So, from the last meet.
Okay. So how do you define accurate?
Say I smoked a lift, but it got turned down for depth, or I got a gift on a lift and said, okay, maybe instead of 900, I should do 870, because that 900 was probably a little. I probably couldn't do that again, even on a good day.
All right. So for those listening or watching, take what your accurate PR is, bump it off, what do you say, 3 to 5%, 2 to some, 5, let's say 5%. Bump it off 5% for 12 weeks. All right. And do the first week and stick to it. Right. And most don't do that either.
No.
Right. It's one of the most ludicrous things I've ever seen in my entire life. Was somebody that was 12 weeks out starting their prep and got a double with what was programmed for a triple. Right. Yeah. One of the possibly the worst example of coaching I've ever seen in my entire life. Because this should be a joke.
Yeah.
you know, at that point, and then kind of scale up into it with all the metrics that you track for yourself. What other things are you tracking through your Excel sheet, which I've heard you've been building for 20 years?
Yeah. I would
or
say
something like that.
the biggest one is projected maxes. And to me, using a projected max for me it made it easier to dial back, because so many people want to do a max set of 3 and say, you know, based on whatever rep calculator or percentage table, if I do this for 3 reps, that means this is my max. I was totally comfortable and confident to say, okay, I'm going to do this for 1 rep, and I know I could have done 2 more, but I'm not going to do them. And then I can tell myself I could have done 3, and this would have been my max. And especially on the secondary or accessory type movements like the pin stuff, or maybe a raw squat was a assistant movement, and I was doing a set of 3, and my goal that day was to leave 2 or 3 reps in the tank. I can come out of that session saying, I know I could have done this weight for 5 or 6 reps, but I stopped at 3. And then I use that projected max to say, if I had done that for 5 or 6, here's what the max would have been.
At what point did you realize you don't need to do the other 2?
Pretty early on, honestly. I mean, 2000 and, I don't know, 10, 12-ish.
Because that's a big thing to understand.
Yeah. And I think it came from confidence, because I'll use my squat as an example because it was the most accurate. The most I think I ever raw squatted in training in the gym was 832, and I did 915 in a meet. The most I ever had on my back in training equipped was 1047, and I did 1135. So, I mean, 100 pounds more in a meet than I did in training consistently throughout my career. So I built that confidence, like, you know, doing something for 1 or 2 reps, knowing I could have done 2 or 3 more, and it says, okay, here's what my max should be. I'd go to a meet and I could do it.
Yeah.
So
how do you help your clients deal with the difference between, because I call that a training max and a competitive max, right? There's a difference. I had a big carryover from that. A lot of people feel that they have to do in the gym what they're going to do in the meet, right? So how do you help them to understand that's not the case?
I think it's just accountability and trust over time. I mean, you've seen it. There's so many different clients out there. The great clients that listen to you and follow the plan, they believe it, and as soon as they see it 1 or 2 times, they're like, okay, I can buy into it now.
Yeah.
But then some people, they don't believe it, and they burn out, and they're, like you said, they're supposed to do an easy set of 3, and they're maxing out as a double.
Yeah.
I
guess that makes sense, because it's one of the things that Louis taught me when I was there, which went kind of like against everything that I knew before being there, was if I went to a meet and when I squatted 900, this was an example. I'll give 2 examples. When I squatted 870, it was the longest squat of my entire life. I mean, I loved it, right? But it's also one of those where you walk away and you're like, I mean, it is. Like, my form was good. It's not like I can say if I did this, it would be better. My gear was good. Like, my weight was good. It's like, damn. You almost hope that you miss, or you're high, or like something, you know, to realize, oh, I had more. Mm-hmm. That was hard, right? Because that was really hard. Because now that was like, I gotta get stronger, which it's the whole point, right? But you get what I'm saying. I don't know. Did you ever have a lift like that, where it was just a grind and everything was right, and then you're like, oh.
I'm early on.
Yeah.
Like, say the first 10 years of competing, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because that was, but then to get that one out of the way, because then you got to deal with the mental issues of figuring out what's wrong with that. And slowly you start figuring out, you know what, this is how I figured it out. It's like, you know what, I should have done these things and I didn't do them. Mm-hmm. So this time I need to do these things, you know, sled work, conditioning, shit like that. I bet if I do those things, then this will, and then it worked. But then when I squatted 900 the first time, it was a joke. It was easy. And I would drive back to the meet and back with Louie. And we're talking about, I'm like jazzed. I'm like, man, we should, the training base this shit on like 950, it's just meathead stuff. Right. And he's like, what'd be the smartest thing to do? And I'm like, and no, it doesn't matter if I said it, he's still going to tell me. He says, if you just did the same shit you just did, nothing more, but just the same stuff that you just did, and actually get the 950, then you'll go in less beat up. You won't be as, problematic.
Mm-hmm.
You'll actually get the weight that you were supposed to get, so there's no reason to increase, because I'm like, we're increasing this, we're increasing this. And then, but for some reason it made sense. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. So I could actually go through a whole half a year of training, not beat the shit out of myself, just do what I just did, and then and it worked.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that realistic,
mm-hmm.
Or comes in from that number too, is you can sit there and think, okay, I smoked this, but that doesn't mean I have to increase everything by what that perceived is.
Yep.
And then leaving stuff on the table
exactly
is a smart one.
Yep.
A big one. Now with the, you've been doing this for a long time with, what is the website? Vanilla Gorilla Crew or Gorilla Squad, or
it's just BlaineSumner.com.
BlaineSumner.com. And then you have an app that's training clients, and you've trained clients for a long time,
mm-hmm.
a decade. And I'm sure they're pretty much all powerlifters. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
yeah.
People who are powerlifters or just love powerlifting.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What are the biggest issues that you see them having?
The stuff that we just hit on. It's like, I'm not saying I'm the best coach in the world or have the best programs in the world, but it's structured, and people that we work together and they stick to it, it works.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are willing to do a set of 3 and leave 3 reps in the tank early on in the program and build up over time are the ones that have success and that stay consistent. The ones that struggle are the ones that go way too heavy. And it's not just too heavy, because there's a difference between saying on squat, hitting a good triple
mm-hmm.
to depth and to standards versus, I did an easy triple, but they were all this high, and
mm-hmm.
they're easy because you were high. And it's like, well, back off on the weight and go deeper. And the people that are willing to hear it and work on it are the ones that see success, and the ones that, don't want to listen or aren't coachable are the ones that don't see the success.
Mm-hmm. After that, what would be the other areas that they have the issues with? I assume if they're hiring somebody to help them, consistency is normally not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Or am I wrong?
It's more of a issue than I thought it would be too.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just people going off program or, wanting to, I'll send them a program and we're working on it, and then I'll see them post something on Instagram, a new PR that's totally unrelated to the program. And I'm like, yeah, what?
And your programs are individualized. The way that you have this set up,
yeah.
Nobody's going to get the same program.
Right.
Go into that a little bit. So how have you built out this, I don't want to say algorithm,
mm-hmm.
algorithm that you have for the clients? What are the metrics that you put in there to be able to help them?
So training days per week, how many squat, bench, and deadlift movements to do per week. And then the big one I would say is weak points. So for squat, bench, and deadlift, have it broken down into bottom, middle, or top. Where's your weak point at? So obviously you're talking about how important the secondary movements are, and mm-hmm. that's how I build all the secondary movements on. So the primary movements are always going to be built off the competition lifts. All of the secondary movements are going to be built off where they're weak. And mm-hmm. I've been good with Excel, and I love Excel, and I'd written so many programs manually by hand over the years for hundreds of lifters, mm-hmm. where one day I had a realization where I'm like, I'm essentially a robot. There's a few knobs in here I turn based on the individual and what they want, where they're strong, where they're weak, how many weeks out they are from their meet. Mm-hmm. Are they just training to get strong, or are they trying to peak? To where I was like, I can logically include everything I always do into a programming logic in Excel.
Yeah. So if they come to you and say they only want to squat 3 days per week, they can do that.
Easily.
Only. What am I talking about? So say they only want to squat 1 day per week. That's in there.
Yep.
Or if they want to go more high frequency, they can do that.
Yep.
And it's all in there. Do you help them to determine where to start, though? If they do the 1 or the 4 and so forth? Like, is there onboarding, I guess? Onboarding.
Yep. So I have like a document I onboard them with, and I always ask them up front. I was like, do you have a preference on how many days per week you train, and then how many squat, you bench, and deadlift? And if they say no, then I kind of use their training history, how long they've been lifting, where their weak points are, and I'll choose myself. But
yeah,
it comes back to the best program is going to be one that someone can believe in and adhere to.
Well, with you being IPF, USAPL, and that seems to trend more towards high frequency, and you're not, right? So are you seen as the ugly stepchild because you're not that high frequency? I thought high frequency, you know what I'm talking about, like 4 squats, 5, 4 deads, 5 squats per week or some stuff like that.
Yep. I think probably so. I think you hit it early on in the very beginning of the podcast. Is sometimes I'm like the redheaded stepchild of all groups, because it's like any more of the USAPL, IPF stuff. It's like gear doesn't exist to them. Yeah. And then multiply people, it's like, well, IPF doesn't exist to them. So,
so weird to me though.
Yeah.
Because it's all powerlifting. And it's the weirdest part to me is it seems like the higher up the ranks you go, the more people realize that. It's the ones that are lower down the ranks that have this weird despise for everybody.
Yeah.
And even to the programming standpoint, which I never really understood.
Yeah.
Granted, I have my programming bias, but I'm not so ignorant to realize that there's a lot of other things that work, which, it could, being in the industry, I don't sell programs, but if you sell programs, I can see where that hurts.
Yeah.
To where to not be biased could actually hurt somebody if they're in the industry, because can you really admit that other things work if you're selling your thing that's supposed to work?
Yeah.
But it's with the high frequency. It seems like in the drug tested, drug free, whatever somebody call it, space, that really started to increase in popularity when Raw came, really.
Yep.
Like when Raw started to come through. And do you know why?
I have a idea on why, I think, and I think it's because to me, when Raw started getting popular, a big part of that was from CrossFit overflow, or CrossFit had people put a barbell in their hands for the first time, and they enjoyed part of it, so they're like, oh, what's this powerlifting about? So, and Olympic lifting also had started to grow immensely at the same time, and I maybe also due to because of CrossFit. So anyways, I think that raw powerlifting, CrossFit, and Olympic lifting all kind of started to grow and have a lot of overlap together. And especially in the Olympic lifting world, high frequency is what they do. You do a clean and jerk or a similar movement 5 or 6 times a week, and so powerlifters then all of a sudden thought, well, this is how Olympic lifters train, so maybe we should squat 6 days a week. That's
but
my
I don't
guess.
know if it's the powerlifter. Somebody's got to tell the powerlifters what to do. If they're all the beginners. So it's got to be the coaching, or whoever the CrossFit box is, I guess, if we want to go back there.
Yeah. Of
what they're disseminating it down through, and it's just small chat. It makes no difference one way or another. It's what they do, and everything's cyclical. So it's just a matter of time until that will filter out, and then something else will take its. Bodybuilding does the same thing: high volume, low volume. It kind of goes through. But this one stayed for a while. It's. I don't think it's picking up any more traction than what it is, but it's not like decreasing in any way either. And I wonder, the one metric I haven't looked into, and maybe is what does the inflow and outflow look like through USAPL, IPF, drug tested federations are, what's the I don't want to say longevity, but are lifters coming in and going out at a faster rate?
I haven't looked at the numbers. My guess is yes.
Okay.
My guess is a lot of people do a couple of meets and then they're out, and that the turnover, especially at the local level, is really high. That's my guess.
Yes. I would tend to believe that that would slow the rate at which the more prevalent program would change.
Yep.
Through that, because they're not around long enough to become stagnant.
Yep.
Right? Because
exactly.
that's the first answer with intermediates and beginners when they become stagnant, is it's the program, not them.
Yep.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Instead of tweaking the program.
Yep.
Okay. When you look back on the world meets and the Arnolds and stuff like that, tell me about a time. Tell me which one comes back to your memory like that. Like, what was the greatest experience out of all of them?
There's 3 that are tied. 2 of the Arnolds, and then the last Worlds I did in Dubai in 2020.
Okay, which one? Give me one of the Arnolds.
2017, and that was when I did the first 500 kilo squat in the IPF. And it was cool because we were on the big powerlifting stage there in the main expo hall, and just especially in the powerlifting world. I mean, it was a giant audience. So just doing the first 500 kilo squat there, and the atmosphere was awesome.
How aware are you after? I'm not going to say before the squat, right? Because as soon as you hit the chalk bowl, you're in a different world, right?
Yep.
When you come back out of that void state, or whatever I want to call it, how aware how aware were you of the crowd and what just happened at that time while you're on the platform?
So even after the lift, you know how it is. You're like on such a high that it's still not registering.
Yeah.
But at that meet, they brought me back out after the squat to kind of recognize it and speak. And it was at that time when I was like, damn, there's a lot of people here, and it's a lot different feel than a normal powerlifting meet.
What did that feel like?
Just top of the world. I mean, at the moment you feel like a rock star,
Yeah.
but then a couple hours later
We got a bench.
Yeah.
Right. But for that time period, were you able to process it at all? Or were you already on the bench? I mean, it's weird, right? Because it's right after a squat.
Yeah. I would say no, like wasn't able to process it because those meets, I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like it's going to for whatever reason, there was a break at that meet, but usually I finished my third squat and like the bar's loaded with 3 plates, and it's like got my knee wraps off, got my squat suit half the way off, and trying to start on my bench warm-ups.
Now, what year was that?
That was 2017.
Now, was that one of the years where you also did like the slingshot bench meet the same weekend?
I think that was 2 years before that, maybe.
Okay. Like how did you do that? Like, didn't you, if I'm remembering, didn't you, I could be wrong, didn't you like compete raw one day and then multiply the next day?
Yeah.
And then slingshot like the third day?
Yep.
Okay. Now what the hell?
I mean, looking back and like hearing it sounds wild and crazy, but at the time it wasn't, because it was at that point in my career I was still trying to be the top in the world raw, at the same time trying to be the top in the world in gear.
So what was the plan? Like, you were just hoping you weren't going to be beat up by the time the second one hit?
Yeah.
And it didn't work out that way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if I slept, but that first night, just on such a high from the first day and getting ready for the second day. But
then I guess on the third day, you're like, screw it. It's at least just a slingshot. It can't be that big of a
Yeah.
deal. Now, what did you feel like after that weekend?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Okay. Worse than what you would feel, because my experience after a normal meet is I feel like I got beat by just run over by a truck.
Yep.
So was it like still getting run over by a truck or being run over by 3 trucks?
3 trucks.
How long did that take to kind of rebound from?
Probably quite a while. I mean, meets for me were always so emotional that I had such a crazy strength dump afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like it would take a month to get back to like kind of normal baseline training.
Yeah. How did you change your training during that month?
Just understood it. On paper, the percentages or the tank reps would be the same, but I went into it knowing like
If it
you know,
doesn't
if
happen,
I was
it doesn't
if I was
happen.
a strong week, it would be 500 pounds, but it's going to be like 450 this week,
Yeah.
and just knew it.
All right, with the original question, you said there were three things. There were 2 worlds. So what was the other one? The second one.
The second one was the 1,003-pound bench at the Arnold in 20. Here's my CTE again.
Yeah.
I don't know. 20,
Whatever, they can look it
18
up.
or 19.
Up on
Yeah.
powerlifting.org.
That one was so cool though, because I did the 1,003-pound bench, and my wife was doing the amateur figure competition there at the same year, and we couldn't watch each other. We'd always been to each other's shows. She was on stage at the same time I was, and she made the finals of the amateur and got third in the amateur, which for her was big. I mean, she had only done really local shows before then. So she just got off the stage from getting third at the amateur and like walked off, and I was up there benching 1,003, and she saw it. And so like we met in the back room right after, and that was one of the coolest times of my life.
Did you compete in the full before that one too?
After.
So you do.
And that was the same day.
That
one was the same day.
The same day.
Yeah, so the bench only was in the morning, and then the full meet was in the afternoon.
But the squat's also in the morning for the full meet.
Well, but there were like 2 separate meets. There was like a bench only meet in the morning.
So they did the squat, then they broke for. I'm confused.
So the bench only meet was in the morning.
Yes.
And then the full meet was in the afternoon.
Got it.
So I
okay.
benched, and then I squat, bench, deadlift.
All right. So then, what did you bench in the meet?
So I did 937, and then I tried 1,003 again, and I dumped it on myself.
Yeah, I wonder why.
So yeah, it'd have been even cooler to do it again, but
no, yeah, of course. Then how? I mean, how did the deadlift? Was that?
I think I did 783.
Yeah. That's crazy. I'm trying to wrap my head around. Now I get it better, because at first I was trying to really like, how did you get from the squat to the bench stage and then back to the other bench stage, you know, and this makes more sense because they divided it off like that.
Exactly.
But at least, well, I could be wrong. You didn't compete the next day in anything, did you?
Nope.
All right. So then that works for that. And then what's the third one?
The third one for sure is Worlds in 2019 in Dubai. I've always had this rivalry against this Russian, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I mean, hate each other, and he'd gotten the best of me in 2016 after I almost sliced my arm off. Yeah. And then the year before, you know, we don't need to go down that hole, but questionable judging calls, this and that. And the Europeans, I never felt like the Europeans liked me, even in the IPF, because they would always say that, oh, my biggest lifts were at the Arnold, so they shouldn't count, because you know, they should only count it European and world meets, not the Arnold. So they always had that against me, and they'd never give me credit for that stuff. So Dubai, it was me against the Russian again, and I whooped his ass, like beat him by like 150 pounds. And I had to hit a big squat there. I did like 1,091 or something in the squat. So, and then I benched a world record and did a total world record. So I did almost 1,100 pound squat, bench world record, total world record, across the world against the Russian, and beat his ass by like 150 pounds. So that was like the ultimate. Y'all can't say anything anymore.
But I assume that was different because now you don't have that stage presence. You don't have all the other stuff because it's just, I don't want to say just a Worlds, right? But it's different. So was that one greater than the first one?
From the outside, it should be, but most people never understood this. I always loved the Arnold more than anything. I would rather do stupid numbers and risk my life in front of a huge audience than go to Europe or overseas and compete in the prestigious Worlds. Yeah. Then
now on the other end, what are when you look back, what are some of the worst performances that you've had?
Easy is the World Games in 2017. Yeah. Easy.
Okay. And that's, for those that don't know, the World Games is once every 4 years, right? Yeah. Okay. And
for those that don't know, I mean, all federations and stuff aside, it is the most prestigious. Like it's associated with the Olympic Committee. You're there with all the sports that are trying to get into the Olympics. I mean, it's very Olympic themed. The warm-up room's crazy. You have your own rack. It's in like these incredible locations. I mean, it's
you have your own rack. Like each lifters have their own rack
in the warm-up room. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Eleiko blinged out. Yeah, I mean it's very professional.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to qualify for. You got to qualify through Worlds. I mean, it's the ultimate of the ultimate, especially in the IPF.
Yeah.
And there was so many ups and downs. It was in Poland. The squat judging was horrible for all the heavyweights. I finally got a squat in. All I needed was my opening lifts, and I would have ran away with first place. So I got my squat in, which was the biggest bomb out risk. I got a bench in, and my bench was so far above everyone else's, I knew if I got a bench, like, it was game over. I've never even come close to bombing out on deadlift in my life. Early 2017 is when my back problems really started to get bad. So my deadlift training for the World Games wasn't great, but it was, I think I opened with 717, which I had opened with for like 5 or 6 years. It was ultra conservative. Let's see here. I could have opened with like 60 or 70 pounds less and still won. Going through warm-ups, my back didn't feel good. And I guess long story short, I went out for 3 attempts and didn't get it. First and only time in my life I've ever bombed out on deadlifts.
Did the bar come off the floor?
Yep, it got to my sticking point easily, and it was so hard because it was like, maybe there was a red flag or two where it was like, man, just lower the opener by 50 pounds and you still got first place easily. But I was like, I deadlifted 100 pounds more than this last year, and I've opened with this weight for like 5 years just because it's always been an ultra conservative opener, always trying to lock in my squat and bench records. And it just, I flew my family out there, my parents, to Poland to watch it. So that was for sure the lowest of lows.
How'd you feel? I mean, obviously felt like shit after that, but anytime something like that happens, it's you're gonna be depressed, you're gonna be pissed, but then you're gonna be solution oriented, right? So what was the solution oriented process?
So it was that failure that made me want to go visit Louis.
Okay. All right. And what changed after that?
Just addressing that. I probably have a low weak back, and that I need to, worry about the technical stuff, but like I got to make strengthening my low back the biggest priority.
Yes. And you squatted heavier after that, right? Did the deadlift come back?
It didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's still a work in progress.
Yep.
Right. With the highs and the lows throughout powerlifting, the one I'm sure you've been told this, maybe not, because you've come up through a different realm. So I'm not going to assume. I'm going to ask. Have you ever been told throughout the whole powerlifting career, like, why do you keep doing this? Like, what's the point of it? That you're financially not benefiting from it. Not you asking yourself, right? Just other people asking you that. Has that been a normal part?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's basically they were all wrong and you were right. So it's just kind of how it all works out with that whole thing, right? Where, for me, that was something that started when I first started competing when I was 13 years old. Like, when are you ever going to get out of this kind of crap? And it is. It was a chip on my shoulder for a long time. Then you realize nobody really meant any harm from that. They probably mean more good than they do bad, but it's just kind of how it was on there. But another thing that they'd always say is, when you're on your deathbed, you're never going to think of any of this stuff, right? And I've been close to that, and what I thought about? The stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
There were certain lifts, there were certain things that happen in the gym, certain memories that kind of come back. Outside of those memories there, if you were laid up, or say you could absolutely never compete again and you're past all the stages of grief and all the other kind of crap, when you look back, what are going to be the things you're going to think about the most?
The lifts at the Arnold in Dubai, and without a doubt.
Okay. Those are key things.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Because the message I want to try to get out with that is there's a lot of people that are probably hearing those same voices, that we heard. It's a different, we'll talk about this too, but it's different when you start asking the question, right? That's a different thing, but they're hearing the same voices. And I don't want to say, ignore them, right? Just understand that they're probably coming from a better place than what you think that they are. But yeah, ignore them, and kind of keep going your direction with that. At what point in time did you start asking yourself those questions?
Never even remotely crossed my mind until dealing with the vertebrae issue and realizing that it may be done.
Yeah. And then when you look at that, the reasons why it may be done, obviously it's not financial, right? It's not that. What's the hardest part with that as you're cycling through it to swallow?
It's all I've ever done and known about and cared about. Like, obviously I had the football career, but I mean, as soon as I learned what lifting was, and I had pictures of Ronnie Coleman in magazines, and then the internet came about and followed all the EFS stuff and followed those guys' stories. Like, that was just, I cared about that more than anything, about I want to be as big and strong as possible. And it just became my identity. And it's every waking moment, is all I thought about was like, what am I going to do today to get better, to get bigger, to get stronger? What can I do? And just like a 24/7, 365 absolute obsession. And so there's just a lot of mental and emotional dollars spent on that I don't have a way to spend anymore.
So obviously it's not 24/7 in your brain now.
Right.
So what is?
Work has taken over some of it. Fishing, obviously spending more time with my wife, and there's trips and stuff we do, like the Dancing with the Stars, stuff that I never would have done if I was competing. So.
Yes. When you were competing, did she ever complain or have issues with some of the decisions that you made because of things like say she wanted to do that and you'd be like, no, I'm not doing that? And
no, I mean, I lucked out. She is a next level unicorn. And I'm having to step away since 2020 from the training weights that I was doing. It's crazy to look back and realize like what kind of person I am while training. I mean, just the hardest person to be around. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think back and look back and relive some of those moments, the way things I, treated people or said to people, to look back at it now. And I wouldn't change anything. Yeah. I had to be that way to do what I did, but I'm lucky to have her by my side, because I put her and a lot of people that helped me train, I put them through a lot.
Well, that's when people talk about things that they sacrifice for the sport, I kind of like circle that around and say, you didn't sacrifice anything. You were doing what you love. Those people are around you. They were the ones that made the sacrifices, and to fully understand that, I don't think you really get it, until you're, on the other end, and then you're grateful for it, because shit, without that, you still would have, this is my caveat to that, without that, you still would have figured it out, because this is the first priority. It's just the way the cards fall, but it helps, it helps to be able to have those other people that are around there, for that. And, are there, with the clients that you have now, are there lifters that you see coming up that, this is a tricky one, right? Because I want to say that coming up that had what your potential when you first started coming up, where the answer was going to be, of course, yes. But at what point do you know they've crossed that chasm that they can actually become better, like really, really? Because I call it shit, suck, good, great, right? Going from shit to suck is like, it's a big jump, right? Because that means you actually got to start and do something. Yeah. Where most people would just rather not do anything. Yeah. So that's a big jump. It's like a huge jump. Then going from good, going from suck to good, that's a lot of steps. Yeah. It's a big learning process to go from just sucking at something to being good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people can fast track it. Genetics can help. All these other things can help. But most of it just comes down to grit, hard work, determination, consistency. You know, a lot of people get blamed with good genetics when it really was all those things, you know, that are in there. Now, going from good to great's another thing, because it's only one step. But it's a big one most people don't want to take.
Yep.
Right? So that's what I'm talking about with that, if it's an it factor or whatever it's going to be. Most fall out before that, right? Because that one other step, it's really not that, it's just completely buying in, being all in, whatever you want to call it. It's rare. Do you see any way that's getting close to actually being able to do that? You know, go from that good to the great.
Yep.
Okay.
I have one that has done it.
Yeah.
And one that can make that jump.
Okay. Now, when you're working with them, it's more a mental game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
So, and it's a game you know well.
Yep.
Because you lived it. Would you agree that most of that's just helping them to back off?
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Where all the other ones, it's mainly a kick in the ass.
Yep.
Okay. Are they more compliant than you were to the people that were telling you to back off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so.
And how are you able to help? How are you able to do that?
I don't, part of it, I was just hard-headed and like I was going to do this my way and ride or die. This is how I was going to do it. So partially being hard-headed, but the two that I'm referring to are both women equipped and lift USAPL or IPF.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if I had a great powerlifter telling me what to do when I was younger, maybe I'd have listened a little more. I don't know. So maybe me having been through and made that jump and they saw that, and maybe it's easier to listen when I say, hey, back off, or hey, do this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but either way, both of them are for sure more compliant to listening to that advice than I was.
All right. Now, when you give that same type of advice to the people that are coming up that are behind that, are you, I don't want to say ignored. Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of the lessons that you're actually trying to help them with goes unheard?
I honestly, no, because, I'm very passionate about the people I coach, but I would say I have a pretty steep rate, and I just do that to filter out a lot of stuff. So I think the people that are willing to come to me and pay that are going to be compliant. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. But I have something strongly I want to say that's related to this, but doesn't answer your question at all.
Yeah.
And it's just related to like how you grow as a lifter in your programming.
Yeah.
The biggest gains I ever made in my life were on my raw squats, and it was from 2000 and kind of when I got done lifting. So maybe, or with football. So maybe like 2010 to 12 or 13, and it was like religious, like 50 pounds a year. And every training block was like 10, 15 pounds more. And it had nothing to do with there was no magic program. There was no magic secondary exercise. There's nothing magic I was doing other than every day when I went into squat, I could find that part of myself where it was like just the adrenaline rush. Like you read the story about the mom getting into an accident and picks the car up off her baby. Like I could literally get to that just absurd adrenaline fueled state every squat session. And that's what I had to do. And that's what worked for me. There's no way to program that. There's no way to you can help guide people with that, but it's like, it's either on or off. And it didn't matter what program I ran, I was going to have the same results. And it didn't matter if the smartest person in the world told me, hey, that's dumb, back off. Cause it is dumb, but that's what I had to do to get to where I was, and I wouldn't have changed anything. I just say all this because it kind of relates to your question about like, even if I had the best advice from the smartest person in the world, I probably would have ignored it because I had to get into those states to make that progress. Where
did that come from football, or did that come from before football? Because it didn't come from the powerlifting.
No. And well, really, I trained that way with squats from day one. I mean,
Yeah, it takes a while to figure it out, though.
yeah,
Like when to turn it on, when to turn it off, because it doesn't help a whole lot with 135.
exactly. Yeah.
Did it? So for me, that whatever you want to call it, came from wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was able just to, at a certain point, just click off
Yep.
and click on, you know, and then visualization helped a lot,
Yeah.
you know, and because that's kind of part of it, for at least for me, it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, seeing it over and over and over, and then, you know, seeing it with fire, you know, and red,
Yeah.
and then equating it to red. I mean, there's a lot of mental
Yeah.
factors where, does it go that far back to high school?
Yeah. And I wrestled when I was young, and I think
Okay.
that part had something to do with it. But yeah.
Because it's not full, for those that don't understand, we're not talking full piss, rage, and aggression, because it's still got to be controlled,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's definitely on the arousal curve,
Yeah.
you know, towards the top,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm sure you fucked up and
Yeah.
went,
Oh yeah.
you know, too far,
Yeah.
you know, over the top. But you learn.
Yep.
And I think the only way you learn those things is to go too far over the top. I think, okay, that was probably not the
Yep.
smartest thing in the world.
And I guess I bring that up because I've ran across people, you know, more the beginner intermediates who I can see that in their training. They're like, you know, they get dialed up. And when I see that, I don't try and hold them back all the time. Or if they go above and beyond and heavier than they were, but they have a successful lift, I kind of back off, and I'm like, some days when it's there and you go above and you take it, that's fine.
Well, I mean, this is where like RPE, and this is where a lot of these things can get weird, right? Because let's say that what we're talking about is like steroids, okay? And you're programming somebody on a percentage-based program, an RPE-based program, and then halfway through the cycle, they decide to just start taking steroids, right? Now, everything's going to get real fucking easy. You know, it's going to get easier because it helps with that. So you can just ignore the fact that they're taking that and then never increase their load, their workload, their work capacity, and that. They can just leave it the way it is. Just assume it didn't happen, it doesn't exist. Well, then they're never going to really get the full benefit of using the anabolic, right? So now let's take it back to just understanding how to mentally put yourself into a lift at different phases. It doesn't have to be full bore, but there's a 10, right? If we're going to RPE, there's a 10, there's an 11, which is bad, but there's a 10. Then there's an 8, you know, and it's some days you only need the 8, but the 8's still higher than most people's 10.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a level there. To not put that into the programming and understand how that plays into it is like ignoring somebody just started taking steroids and they're taking, you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
So now granted, you don't want people hitting ammonia capsules and, you know, getting buck ass crazy on every set of everything that they do in the gym, or they're not going to be able to recover from it. But that's a not talked about thing that goes along with training. That how do you periodize that?
Yeah.
You know, how's that going to your algorithm? You know, how's that playing into all this shit? You know, which all of a sudden makes you think this is with the rabbit holes of programming, which makes you think, what the fuck's any of this for? Right?
Yep.
But I'm glad you brought that up because that's a huge one, right?
Yeah.
They end up being war paint on the stage, right? Where let me follow that up though and say, during a meet, I used to call them Zippy cars, right? Louis would say, I have 3 Zippy cars. After that, you have no more left. Like I could really get amped up 3 big times. That's it. You know, so if I needed 2 for my squat, it's like, fuck. You know, did you find that there was only so many times you could really hit that state in a meet, or in a day? Because the meet's different. Training is one thing.
Yeah.
Training, you're going to hit it like once, maybe twice. That's it. But in a meet, it's different.
Yeah.
Did you find a point that you weren't able to pull it off?
I don't know if I had a point where I wasn't able to pull it off, but I think the Zippy cards are related to why my deadlift always lagged, and it was because I'd use 3 Zippy cards on squats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And bench for me is a different mind state. It's not so much like adrenaline and zippy state, but still. So anyways, I think a lot of times by the time I got to deadlifts, I never felt worn out at the meet, but I think I spent a lot of emotion and energy on the 3 squats and then making sure I get a bench in. And by the time deadlifts rolled around, usually I had to meet one. I never had that like heightened state that I ever needed for deadlifts.
Well, I can't prove this in any way, but I think that going to that heightened state, especially in a meet, is why it felt like you got run over by a truck the next day. Because it wasn't, I don't think it was the lifting.
Right.
It's just everything just got poured out. And now there's fucking nothing left. You're just done. But that's my speculation from, my own self, from that. On the flip side of that, I'll see a lot of people get motivated and psyched up, whatever you want to call it, differently, where I'll see some people trying to get them super riled up, and it's one of these people that they just don't work that way, right? And how do you determine that? Because I've seen some people that they're like joking around and it's just like fuck off, and then they just lay down and just kill PRs. But if they try to focus and get more mentally into it, they're a disaster. Have you seen that same thing?
Are you talking about for myself individually?
Not for you individually, but just with other lifters.
Yeah, I haven't been around a ton of other lifters at meets when I'm not there competing. So just speaking for myself, I'm a nervous person, like all the way back to being wrestling as a tiny little kid. I mean, every sporting event, wrestling, football, every powerlifting meet, I super nervous, crazy nervous. Even if I was going against a kid in wrestling that I had destroyed earlier and knew I would destroy again, I just get very nervous. Or even going into a meet knowing I had to hit my last warm up and I would win the meet. I'm just still crazy nervous, but that nervousness is what turned into adrenaline when I needed it to. So I hated the feeling of the nervousness, because like I'm talking, especially a big meet, like a week out, I'm freaking nervous and I'm snapping at my wife and can't eat, can't drink, can't focus. But it boils and boils and accumulates, and can't sleep the night before. The morning of, my palms are sweaty and paley and I can't talk to a single person. I just like want to snap. But then when the bar's loaded, I'm able to like turn that nervousness into pure adrenaline. So I definitely can't be joking around in the warm-up room and whatever, and then boom, go turn it on. Like it's there for a long time before, and it's just boiling and building up until it's showtime.
And that's been there since wrestling.
Yeah. I thought it would go away. Like, you wrestle long enough or play football or powerlift long enough, like, oh, I'm experienced. I've done this forever. I know what to expect. It never got better. Went away.
Yeah. Have you found, is there anything were there training sessions that you had that you would start to feel that way? Just not as bad, but like a few days before?
Almost every squat session.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any now?
No. I wouldn't say so.
So where's that gonna unleash?
I think it rears its head every couple weeks with my training, because the back will be feeling bad, and so I'll be rehabbing and resting it, and then I'll have a few weeks where I can get back under some weight and it's feeling good, and I'm like, I can get back to where I can step foot on the platform again. And then but so those good training weeks, I'm unleashing the monster and feeling like my old self, and then it's just get slammed back to reality.
Yeah. But is the reality just finding a way to deal with the monster?
Yeah, I think so.
Which kind of goes back to the other thing. I don't know if it's about the meat. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
another mind fucker where you just play with a little bit. deal with the same shit. Just got to find your own way to kind of work through that. With your is your app your online training, or is that different?
It's different.
Okay, so how's that different?
So the app has more cookie cutter type programs. Like it'll still auto regulate you.
Yeah.
But there's like 12 canned programs. So the programs in the app aren't custom, but it's great for people that want to, like, be up with technology and have their program on their phone, and they can plug the numbers into their phone, store video on there. Whereas the coaching and the custom programs are like true 100% tailored, but I still deliver them in a PDF type format.
Okay, so the customization is the bigger thing. So
Yeah.
the first one is just, it's going to sound bad. The first one is basically what every online coach does anyhow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
No, that's fair.
And that's kind of what's in. The other one is more of a specialized thing.
Yep.
Is there, when you came here for this podcast, what questions did you think I was going to ask?
Mostly very different ones than you did ask.
What?
Well, we talked before, like I've done a lot of podcasts and everything just like scratches the surface.
Yeah.
It's chicken shakes or tell me about your training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you either knew enough about me or just knew mentally how the kind of person I am, because you've been around yourself and other lifters like that, that scratching the surface stuff was nothing. You already knew all about it and knew the deeper roots, and you dove into the hows and the whys and the deeper stuff. I enjoy questions like this a lot more than, so why do you squat 3 days a week, or why do you squat this, or why do you choose this squat assistance, or if someone misses here, why would you choose this type movement?
Well, those in my opinion, those are the answer. Those are the questions that start with "it depends," right? And
Yep.
I try not to ask those questions, right? Because that can become a whole podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It really can. Because if we start going down every rabbit hole of what that is, it's surface. Like I said, it's surface level stuff. Are there any topics that you thought I was going to talk about that we didn't bring up?
You kind of addressed it when you answered the stuff for me at the beginning, but I was surprised the steroids stuff didn't come up more.
Yeah. Well, I'll bring that up here just in a little different way. I see it a little bit differently than a lot of other people do, and I didn't always see it that way. And that is when I've had the company for 25 years now almost, and sponsored a lot of lifters over the years. And there's been several times where certain lifters would say that they're drug free, and I'd be like, that's bullshit. It's maybe some of it was selfish because they're stronger than I was. Like, well, you can't be stronger than I am if I use stuff and then you're not. Like, that's not possible. So some of it's probably that. Some of it's just being around the sport, and seeing what other people do. And I can name off like 6 or 7 of them, and I've done it in past podcasts. I'm not going to do it again. And they're competing in the WPO. Then a lot of them it was kind of pissing me off a little bit because it's not being filmed, and it's like, why you fucking lying? Like, I don't understand this. And then each one of them over a period of 18 months, would say, I'm thinking about doing my first cycle. And it, like, what? Why, like, you guys all get together now and like this, you're just trolling me. Like, what is the point? And then they would ask really like stupid basic questions. And I'm like, now I'm going to get mad on that. And then they all eventually went on. And then all of their totals went up like 300 pounds. Right? And it's like, there was a reality check. Like, wait a minute. They were totaling like top world record. I mean, they're totaling like world record totals and top totals. And they weren't taking anything. And the only time I've ever seen gains like that was like first cycle gains. And it was like this reality check, like, you know, people can be way fucking stronger than they think they are, right? And then I think they could be, you know, without drugs. So after that point in time, I don't get into this natty or not bullshit. I'm like, whatever, man. There's people who are just fucking strong, and that you take somebody that has, you know, a great genetic structure, right, and damn near played in the NFL, right? And now you take that great structure and you put that with hard work, you put it with discipline, you put it with consistency. You don't drink, you don't fucking smoke, you fucking eat chicken shakes per day. I mean, you're doing this stuff at this locked in, all in level, far greater than probably anybody has, right? And then you're going to sit there and disregard the fact that if you're going to tell me you're drug free, that you're not. When if people would just did half, if the people who use shit just did half the stuff that you did and half the consistency you did, they'd be way fucking better.
Yeah.
So maybe other than them, you know, criticizing and saying, oh, he's lying for taking drugs, maybe they ought to fucking do those things and then put the 500 pounds on their total that they're leaving on the platform before doing that. I mean, it's kind of me getting on my high horse about all that, but it's, you know, I don't see the point. You know, it's, you've been drug tested a fucking million times. You know, there's a question, right? I didn't ask it, I had it on my list. You know, how'd that work? You know, when you were drug tested, because it was WADA, whatever it is.
Yep.
Right. So they can show up at any time at any place.
Yep.
Right. So what are some of the times and places that they showed up that were just whack?
And they do. So I was on the WADA Adams list, which there's only, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 Americans, but only a handful of IPF athletes on it, where every quarter you have to turn in your whereabouts. You have to give an hour time block every single day of where you will be, your work schedule, your training schedule, your school schedule. And they do show up. And I've had a few awkward moments of them showing up. One was in the summer. They showed up earlier than the time. I always put like 9 to 10 p.m. and at my house, because that's where I know I'll always be. But they showed up earlier, and I was at a lake an hour away. And so they drove out there to meet me. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was this dude that worked for a German company there to test me for WADA. I mean, we're in Wyoming here. Like this is like a different
like gun
world,
country. Yeah.
Right. So first he walked into the house. My son was home. He walked into the house and like kind of pushed some stuff through the door with my son home alone. Then my son called me and told me what was going on. And I was like, well, I'm at the lake, and once you make contact, you're not allowed to leave. So I had to stay there, wait for him. Every place was closed. So I needed to do a drug test, piss in a cup for him. There's a little gas station there in the middle of nowhere, and he's, you know, foreign and does not look like he's from Wyoming, and walks in, and I'm behind them, and he's like asking them if we can do a drug test in their bathroom. And I'm like, God, this is so weird. And then there's a broke down motel in the middle of nowhere by this lake too. And he's like, well, we can go and just get a room for the drug test there. And I was like, I'm not doing this, man. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Like, this town is too small.
No,
you're weird. This is why.
No,
that's
messed up.
And I was like, we can drive the hour back to my house. Like, that's what I'll do. So I had to ride with him. You know, once it makes contact, I can't leave. So, I mean, just cluster stuff like that. But they show up all the time, unannounced.
He's lucky his ass didn't get shot.
There's more to the story. So after the drug test was done and sealed, and I was like, I mean, I wouldn't think they'd tamper with it, but I was like, okay, once this is done, I pulled him outside and chewed his ass out and made him go back in and apologize to my son, because I was like, this is, you know, if there's 10 houses around here and you go into 9 of these other ones, like, you're probably getting a gunshot in you.
Exactly.
You know, like, it is wild.
Unbelievable. How many times do you think you were tested in a year? Just average.
Outside of competitions, I'd say 5 to 6.
Fuck. That would suck, right? I mean, it's just inconvenience of that.
And well, the worst part is too, if you miss 3 tests, it counts as a failure. So like if they show up and you're not where you said you were, it counts as a miss. And I had 2 at one point. One, I went to the LA Fit Expo for a sponsor, and I didn't, update that I was going to be gone that night. And I posted on social media, like, I'm here at the LA Fit Expo with my wife doing this and this. So they didn't even go to show up. and they counted that as a missed test because I didn't update my whereabouts that I was going to be there instead of home. And then my work schedule got very crazy the last few years to where probably once or twice a month I leave and it's on short notice, and the system to update your whereabouts is a pain in the butt. So I generally hadn't been doing it, and they showed up and at home and I wasn't there. So that counted as a strike too. So
do you have to still do that now?
So since the IPF and USAPL split out,
Yeah,
I'm off of the WADA Adams list because I'm not right now. I'm not associated with the IPF in any way. So
you'd have to compete. I mean, wait a minute. Like, what would be the way back to the Worlds for you?
it would be through that Powerlifting America, qualifying through there to go to the IPF meets.
Okay. Well, then again, as soon as you go and lift there, you're running the risk of being able to coach the other IPF lifters.
Yeah.
Right. No. You can do that. And no, so the USAPL, you don't run the risk there, from what you know.
Right. From what I know.
From what you know, which can change.
Yeah. And on the drug testing thing too. So, I haven't competed since March of 2020. This July, I went down to help at a USAPL seminar in Denver, and I showed up there and they surprise drug tested me too, like going down to help at a seminar.
Really?
Yeah.
There was this, I don't know if it was a USAPL at the time or if it was ADFPA. It may have been USAPL. Louis was contracted to do a seminar at a meet, right? And it was just a small little bench seminar and whatever. And as soon as that was known that he was doing the seminar, they came to his house to do a drug test. And in short, he basically threw the guy off of his porch. And I believe he was not able to do the seminar, which was, ridiculous.
Yeah.
But just for him to be able to do a seminar at a meet required this drug test bullshit, which was just ridiculous. Where, you're showing up, you're not even, you haven't competed, and wow. So are you even still a member?
I think I'm still a member of the USAPL because I was considering doing the Arnold bench meet this year, 2022. So I'd renewed my membership so that I could sign up for it if I felt I was able to get healthy and do it. So I renewed my membership then. But
what are your thoughts now as far as doing that?
On the Arnold thing, I think that's doing the bench meet at the Arnold is probably the closest I am to thinking that I could compete and be happy at the level that I'm doing.
Do you think you need to be 400 to do that?
I don't think so, but I worry about the, like we said, the, lighting that fire a little bit can just turn into a bonfire real quick.
Do you think so? If it was just one, if it was just one lift? This is the question. If I was in your head, I don't know if it would or not, because you're a total lifter, not a bench lift. You get it?
Yeah. Sitting here now, I can tell you, I think I could do it and not try and get to 400 pounds. But I'm just, I worry once I start to get under the bar and see, I could do more if I was this, or, hey, this guy's actually kind of close to me. I'm not going to have that happen. That's getting bit by that competitive venom is what worries
plus
me.
Your gear's not going to fit.
Exactly.
Right. So there's that whole issue with that too, which forgot that. Were there any other topics you thought I was going to bring up that I didn't bring up?
No, you nailed it.
All right.
You more than nailed it.
What's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I assume it's your website, right?
Yep.
Which is blainesumner.com.
Yep.
We'll have the link in the description with that. Your socials are Vanilla Gorilla.
I think my Instagram's the Vanilla Gorilla 92.
Vanilla Gorilla 92. He's got his dancings on there just like a week ago. I did look that out. He might have a special on his app right now. I'm not too sure, but I think I saw that too. So go check out his Instagram. I want to thank you for coming out. I appreciate you taking the time and come out here and do this. It's awesome to have people like you out here. And for all you guys, we're done.